So today's topic is a very small topic. Chapter time बहुत ही छोटा chapter था. But so we could have done this through notes also. Well, just because we had a class, I said, okay, let's finish this. Okay. Previous year question बहुत बेसिक सेमती किसी आसी नहीं, but आसी पारे. Okay. I expect actually planning ru. If actually not from planning, they can ask me a question from Niti Aayog, because that is the recent, something which is we had a change of an era, right? So they can ask you a question on Niti Aayog, or else they can ask you some broader, holistic question on planning. That is what I'm expecting. They can ask you, ki, what do you mean by planning? What are its objectives or what are its goals? Okay. So planning ro lacuna kono. Is ଜିନିଷ ପଚାରି ପାର. Otherwise, I don't think they will ask you very simplistic kind of question. कि evaluate तो नो कि को प्लान ने कौन कराइतला फर्स्ट 5 year प्लान ने कौन कराइतला 9th 5 year प्लान ने कौन कराइतला ए भलिया क्वेश्चन यूजुअली पचारिबे ना क्वेश्चन will be sort of, if asked, they will be very holistic kind of question. Okay, overall understanding को test करा जो. Okay, so let's begin with the concept of planning. The planning itself means what? Okay. Now I have not written something here. Actually, it should be, hang on a second, it should be economic planning. अदरवाइज प्लानिंग करे तो बहुत किसी जिन बुझा जीव. ओके, तो मैं कोठी गोटे, अरे यार इकोनॉमिक कौन है, तुम किसी गोटे प्लान करूछ कोठी गोटे ट्रिप करिया को, इवन दैट इज ए सॉर्ट ऑफ प्लानिंग. बट व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय इकोनॉमिक प्लानिंग? तो इकोनॉमिक प्लानिंग इज ए टेक्निकल टर्म. सो दिस इज a technical term, right? Technical term or economic term. So this is a very specific thing, which means it is a set of policy measures undertaken to achieve some predetermined and clearly defined set of objectives, okay, as per national priorities. ता माने हला कि प्लानिंग होचे एमितिया जिंस जोटा कि आगरु ही हमें ऑलरेडी डिसाइड करदा कि these are our goals, okay, and these are our methods. This is the meaning of planning. Now you will say कि सर ये तो बहुत नॉर्मल कथा, तो यार ऑपोजिट आ कौन ही पारे? यार ऑपोजिट गोटे ही परिबो कि we will not have any predetermined goals, right? we will do we will we will conduct how we will conduct our governance, or how we will run our economies on based on the day to day needs, right? Now, can you tell me which one is better, which one is worse? Given between these two choices, which one is better, which one is worse? So there is no predetermined goals, so there is nothing here. So which one do you think is better? कौन वाला? Am I audible?
Sir, method with goal.
Okay, so this one is obviously, this seems better. Why? Because planning रो हमको जाना पड़ुची कि किसी गोटे something which is long term, right? And something which is well thought out. Well thought out in the sense that you have previously decided these are our goals, and you have decided these are our methods. So we know that you are a bit organized, and you will, accordingly you will spend your resources well. So एटा कौन हला हमें हमें कौन या द्वारा कौन हबो हम रिसोर्सेस गुडा को भलो वे रे स्पेंड करि परिबो. ओके, प्रीवियसली भलो वे रे प्लानिंग करथि. वेरी सिंपली तो गोटा सपोज किसी गोटे इवेंट ऑर्गेनाइज करछ, you need to first of all know कि how many people are going to attend, how many people you are going to invite. So accordingly you will plan everything. Suppose तमे कौन करियो, तमे किछि लोक केते लोक आसे कौन करे, किछि न भाबी किछि अल्प किछि खाया सामान किछि नै खाया पिए. So हेई पारे लोक ताठारो एक्स्ट्रा ही पारंती, हेई पारे ताठो कम ही पारंती, खाया बळी जीव, खाया वेस्ट हो. So planning, similarly, economic planning is a sort of a long-term perspective. We set from the beginning some clearly defined goals. These are the goals we are going to achieve, and accordingly we lay out the plans how we are going to achieve it. So what are the different goals? What are these goals specifically? First and foremost, the main goal is higher economic growth. Okay. Second is human development. We had discussed in the chapter growth and development that these two are different things. These two are not the same thing. Growth is something which is related to overall size of the economy. Development is something which is related to the quality of life of the citizens. Okay. So it's not always necessary that due to economic growth there will be development, but generally, as a country or as an economy grows more and more, it is likely that human development will also increase. Not always happens, but it is likely. Okay. So planning ro goal होला both economic growth as well as human development. Similarly, welfare measures, social security, poverty alleviation, ये सब जिन सभी अच्छी. Modernization of the economy अच्छी. Modernization in the sense here it will also mean technological upgradation भी होगा, right? Technological upgradation भी होगा. Similarly, optimum use of the country's resources, very very important. Planning ro actually main reason. See, a country like US, UK, Germany, they can afford not to have planning. But a country like India, specifically in the era of 1947 to let us say 1990, even up to 2000, we need to have a sort of planning because our resources are limited. US, UK, Germany, unlimited resource to कहबनी, but still they have a large number of resources. So they can afford to be a sort of this kind of thing they can afford. Day to day needs से ସେମାନେ केवल କରିପାରିବେ ଚଲେଇ ପାରିବେ ତାଙ୍କ country. But ଆମର resources limited ଅଛି, so we have to manage, right? So therefore we need planning. You can think of it as, you think of Indian Railways. Now Indian Railways ର problem ହଉଛି କି ଆମ ପାଖରେ train number enough ଅଛି, ଠିକ ଅଛି, but tracks ବହୁତ limited ଅଛି. Actually track laying କରିବାଟା ସବୁଠୁ ବେଶୀ difficult, right? So हमको limited track ରେ manage କରିବାକୁ ପଡିବ. ତ manage କେମିତି କରୁ? Suppose ଏଇ ଗୋଟେ ହିଁ track ଅଛି ଗୋଟେ stretch ରେ. ତ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଗୋଟେ ଏଇଠି ଗୋଟେ station or junction ଅଛି, ଏଇଠି ଆମେ ବହୁତ ସାରା loop ତିଆରି କରୁ. ତ ଏଇଠି multiple train କଣ ଆଗ ପଛ କରିକି ଆମେ ଚଲେଇବୁ, ଗୋଟେ train କୁ ଏଇଠି ରଖି ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ train କୁ ଏପଟେ ଆଗେଇ ଦବୁ. So this is the main track, ଗୋଟେ ହିଁ track ଅଛି, but multiple train କୁ ଆମେ କେମିତି manage କରିବୁ, ଏଇଠି କିଛି train ରଖିକି କିଛି train ୟାକୁ ଆଗରେ ଚଲେଇ ଦବୁ, କିଛି train ପଛରେ ଚଲେଇ ଦବୁ. So similarly ତ ଏଇଟା ହବ କେମିତି? ପ୍ଲାନିଂ କଲେ ତ ହବ ନା. If you don't plan it, then what will happen କି ଗୋଟେ single train କୁ ହିଁ ଚଲେଇବାକୁ ତମେ ସବୁବେଳେ ବାଧ୍ୟ ହବ, right? So countries means your resources must be optimized. Otherwise, a poor country like India cannot manage its people, right? ସେମିତି economic self-reliance, equity, social justice. Okay. In general, equity and social justice are also, the goals of human development. So the goals of planning are also similar. And this is the most important thing, macroeconomic stability. ଆମେ inflation ଯେତେବେଳେ ଯୋଉ ଗୋଟେ chapter ରେ ପଢୁଥିଲୁ, ଯେତେବେଳେ RBI or monetary policy ରେ inflation ବି ଟିକେ ପଢୁଥିଲୁ, ସେଥିରେ initially I had explained to you what do we mean by macroeconomic stability. Macroeconomic indicators were read or not? Macroeconomic indicators, you can say which are the macroeconomic indicators. कौन macroeconomic indicator मने पड़ुची?
So CPI, WPI.
Very good. WPI तनो CPI, GDP in general. Okay. What else? Your forex reserve amount जेते अछि, है ना? So these are the macroeconomic indicators. Okay. So that means कि गोटे macroeconomic indicators होची overall health of the economy को देखुची. So planning रो गोटे goal होची macroeconomic stability, माने overall health of the economy should be good. For example, inflation. Inflation माने कौन? Inflation should be under a specific range. For example, 2 to 6%. एटा हेले हमें कहबो कि गोटे country रो, India type रो गोटे country रो macroeconomic stability अछि. So all of these are part of the goals of planning. Right? एक वाला question किसी directly they can ask you. What do you mean by planning? What are the goals of planning? Now, before we assess planning, what are the advantages or disadvantages of planning? Let us go through a little bit of the history of planning in India. Planning go to start hela. So planning, economic planning in general, समस्त economic planning वाली भावंती. Planning माने कौन? ना 5-year plans. But actually, economic planning is a broader term. 5-year plan is a smaller thing. Right? So economic planning can be something. 5-year plan, no, that can also be an economic planning. Right? If you are setting some targets and you are setting some ways or methods to achieve them, then that can be called as planning. 5-year planning is a one type of plan. सेमते देखो even 10-year planning भी अच्छी, 15-year plans भी अच्छी, okay, 3-year plans भी अच्छी. So these are all subcategories of economic planning. Are you able to understand or not? Economic planning fixed सेमते किछि नुहो कि गोटे type of 5-year plan ही economic planning. Right? So that means जदि 5-year plan ही economic planning नुहो ताले हमर कोन आगु किछि planning हे नथला, आगुरो हेतला. In fact, independence पूर्वरु भी बहुत सारा economists as well as thinkers एमाने सब बहुत सारा plans देते economic plans देते right. So we are going to see that history ये कौन plan देते. First of all, you know this person M Visvesvaraya. Who is Visvesvaraya?
ଆମର ଇଞ୍ଜିନିୟର ଯେ କରିଥିଲେ ସବୁ
Yes. कौन करथिले से National Engineer Day, Engineers Day
Yes, sir.
है ना.
Yes, sir.
So we celebrate. So I expect that engineers जो हमारे class रे अच्छा you should know. Okay. So he is sort of like a god for us, right? So without Visvesvaraya, there is no engineering in India. Okay. There is a very famous story about Visvesvaraya. I'm going to tell you very briefly. Sir Visvesvaraya, when he was very young man, he was traveling in a train. तो से ट्रेन नो साउंड रो तांको लागिला कि किछि गोटे गड़बड़ अछि. आई थिंक तांकर ट्रेन नो ट्रैक आई थिंक माने वेल लेड आउट नाही और सम इंजन नो इशू अछि. सो ही called the ticket collector and he said कि sir there is some issue from the sound. I can understand कि there is some issue in the engineering. So the ticket collector started laughing. He said कि who are you? तुमे कि एते कथा साउंड तो सुनी जानि होछ. से कहले आज्ञा आपण टे ट्रेन अटकी कि चेक करंतु जदि किछि भूल बाहरिला ताल you can correct it, otherwise you can throw me out of that train. And such was his conviction that he forced the train to stop and they checked and actually there was some problem. Okay. So they fixed it. Whatever he had said, it was exactly the same problem. They fixed it, and we realized ki what a great talent he is. There is a photo of Prime Minister Nehru himself coming to the office of Visvesvaraya and felicitating him. Okay, he is such a giant person. So he was one of the earlier planners. He gave one of the earliest plan, and in his book Planned Economy for India. So यार goal कौन थिला? Poverty eradication through growth. Okay. So in short, you can also imagine him. By the way, এটা হচ্ছে গোটা Google Doodle. Google Doodle, you know, विश्वेश्वरायଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ Google Doodle ଟା ହେଇଥିଲା. Google Doodle is something which is dedicated to a person, famous person or something. ତାଙ୍କର ଯୋଉ usually ତାଙ୍କର birthday ଇଏରେ ହୁଏ. Google.in they provide this thing in respect of the person. So poverty eradication through growth. तो ସେମାନେ ସେ विश्वेश्वराय ଆଉ କଣ recommend କଲେ? Heavy industries को first develop କରିବାକୁ recommend kale. By the way, poverty eradication through growth, what kind of theory can we call it? Economic growth through a poverty eradication haba. Can you tell me? Trickle down theory. Right? So that means he was one of the earliest proponents of something similar to trickle down theory. Upon the say concept asi nathila. But he had a similar concept. He growth through a poverty eradication haba. Right. So first, government should try to increase the size of the economy. Then the benefits will percolate down to the people. Right. सेमती heavy industries जो recommend कले. Finally एटा Mahalanobis was also Mahalanobis later on recommended the same thing. Right. Heavy industries जोटा second 5-year plan में थिला. By the way, let me tell you, ये entire chapter टा एमिति जदि तुमे textbook रे पढ़िबो, it may seem very factual, right? But if you integrate this with the history, if you try to understand the stories, then it will become a concept. And a concept is easier to remember. Right? Fact is difficult to remember. Facts are difficult to remember. This is also something I was telling you yesterday, how to remember some, facts and figures. Suppose what a poverty, or suppose there is a fact on inequality. We were discussing inequality. तो जबरदस्ती मान रखो कि level of inequality in India suppose 25% or 30% according to some index or something. But instead, if you can remember through some kind of story, some kind of statement, then you will be easy. It will be easy for you to remember. For example, I might discuss inequality or what a fact. Oxfam India. Can you recall? କାହାର ମନେ ଅଛି?
ସାର୍ ଗୋଟେ ୱାର୍କର କୁ କମେଇବା ପାଇଁ ତାକୁ 3 ବର୍ଷ ଲାଗିବ ଆଉ ଏମିତିରେ ଆମ୍ବାନୀକୁ ଗୋଟେ ସେକେଣ୍ଡରେ କମେଇବ ସେତିକି ପଇସା.
Very good. So अंबानी को जहाँ ଗୋଟେ ସେକେଣ୍ଡ ରେ ଯାହା କମେଇବାକୁ ଲାଗିଲା, in 2020 we are talking about this. The richest Indian back then was Mukesh Ambani. ଗୋଟେ unskilled worker କୁ ସେଟା 3 ବର୍ଷ ଲାଗିବ କମେଇବାକୁ ସେତିକି earn କରିବାକୁ. So this is the level of inequality, right? Now this is something that you can better remember rather than ଗୋଟେ गोटे हार्ड फैक्ट जोटार किसी लिंक नहीं गोटे माने कॉन्सेप्ट संगे so similarly entire chapter to planning the textbook रो एमती पढ़ियो बोरिंग लागि पारे but if you understand this through history and story it will seem to be a concept and actually planning is a concept, right? So my goal today is to give you that kind of concept which will be better for you to remember, okay? सेमितिया विश्वेश्वराय कौन रेकमेंड करथिले गोटे ऑफिशियल बॉडी फॉर प्लानिंग which is later on turned out to be planning commission. 1950 रे जाके एटा प्लानिंग कमीशन हला but he had recommended this in 1934 itself. So you can see what kind of a visionary the person was, right? Next कौन plan हितला National Planning Commission 1938. This was which was established by the Indian National Congress. So you can see from this these are all pre-independence era time रो सब plan गुड़ा. The chairmanship under the chairmanship of Jawaharlal Nehru. So Jawaharlal Nehru for under it established कराइतला and this advocated the establishment of heavy industries. Again, from the beginning you will see that most people advocated heavy industries. So heavy industries in public sector to build all other industries. Now heavy industries are exactly माने कौन how it leads to creation of other industries we will see on later on. Okay, यहाँ पे अच्छी I have explained. Then third point is he also advocated the redistribution of land. So redistribution of land means land reforms to be say advocate for the National Planning Commission had advocated back in 1938 because back then also we had understood the inequality or landlessness of farmers that was one of the major causes of poverty in India. Right? तापर कौन है 1944 अराउंड रे इंडिया रो किसी मेजर इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट माने प्रपोज करथिले ई प्लान को व्हिच इज द बॉम्बे प्लान. ओके, जेआरडी टाटा बिरला से टाइम रो माने मेजर इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट दे प्रपोज्ड अ प्लान व्हिच इज कॉल्ड प्लान फॉर इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट ऑफ इंडिया. आ एमानकर गोल थिला कि एग्रीकल्चरल सेक्टर आउटपुट को डबल करिया 15 इयर्स रे. फैक्ट जदि मन रहिला ठीक अछि, मन न रहिला भूली जाओ, बट दिस इज द मोस्ट इंपोर्टेंट पार्ट. ସେମାନେ କଣ କହିଲେ କି India should focus on development based on expansion of textile and consumer industries existing in cities like Bombay and Ahmedabad. Now, who can tell me what could have been the inspiration behind such kind of recommendation? काहेकि एमाने जेआरडी टाटा बिरला एमाने काहेकि कहले कि टेक्सटाइल और कंज्यूमर इंडस्ट्री को एक्सपैंड करा जो अराउंड सिटीज लाइक बॉम्बे एंड अहमदाबाद. वेरी सिंपल थिंग भावटी
Sir, freedom fighters
कोनटा कौन कहला
सर ମୁଁ କହିଥିଲି କି ସେପଟ ଏରିଆରେ କଟନ ପ୍ରୋଡକ୍ସନ ବହୁତ ହୁଏ ତ ସେପଟ ଟେକ୍ସଟାଇଲ ଇଣ୍ଡଷ୍ଟ୍ରି ଗ୍ରୋ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଇଜି ହବ.
करेक्ट, बट कॉटन टेक्सटाइल तो अन्य जगह रे भी होतला, कोलकाता रे भी होतला. वेरी सिंपल थिंग कि ସେମାନେ ତାଙ୍କର ନିଜର ପ୍ରॉफिट को मैक्सिमाइजेशन କରିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଥିଲେ. जीआरडी टाटा बिरला दे हैड एक्चुअली set up their industries on textile consumer industries, specifically on consumer industries already around Bombay and Ahmedabad. तो ସେମାନେ ସେଇ अराउंड रे इंडिया ର डेवलपमेंट କରିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି ମାନେ ସେମାନେ ଗवर्नमेंट को କହୁଛନ୍ତି ତେଲିଆ ମୁଣ୍ଡରେ ତେଲ ଦିଆଯାଉ ଆଉ ଟିକେ ହେଲା. सो गवर्नमेंट को they had recommended कि तुम आमर ही इंडस्ट्रीज गुड़ारे आउ टिके इन्वेस्ट करो, so we will provide employment to the people and धीरे धीरे डेवलपमेंट टा कोन स्प्रेड करिवो from cities like Bombay to Ahmedabad. Okay, so this is a very simple thing that you should be logically you also can understand. Similarly ସେମାନେ भी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर और बेसिक इंडस्ट्रीज डेवलपमेंट करिया पे गवर्नमेंट को सजेस्ट कले. बेसिक इंडस्ट्रीज लाइक आयरन एंड स्टील. व्हाई बेसिक कहेंगे? बिकॉज iron and steel are basic because they become the basis or framework for all other industries, right? Iron and steel टा होची गोटे physical infrastructure रो सब physical infrastructure रे निश्चय दरकार. So एटा यदि डेवलप न होला ताले अन्य इंडस्ट्रीज किछि डेवलप ही करियो नाही. So for that reason you will see almost all of the early plans including the early first to 5-year plans, they were also advocating these basic industries or these heavy industries which included iron and steel, right? Then Gandhian plan by S.N. Agarwala. S.N. Agarwala was actually a Gandhian social reformer as well as freedom fighter. Okay. So S.N. Agarwala was inspired by the Gandhian model. So the Gandhian model माने कौन? तुम्हें गांधी करो economics, see Gandhian economics. What is the difference between Gandhian economics and other kind of economics? For example, what we let's call it capitalist economics or even socialist economics. What is the main difference? Can you tell me?
Sir, socialist economics like overall like national GDP ଆଉ ସେସବୁରେ ଗାନ୍ଧୀଙ୍କର କିନ୍ତୁ village level village economics how to empower and
Very good, excellent. So can we call it a matter of scale? Gandhian economics ର scale ଟା ବହୁତ ହି small ଥିଲା, village ଆଉ individual level ରେ ଥିଲା. Okay. Whereas if you see these two, capitalist and socialist, both of them had similar scale, which is pan national, মানে national level. National or subnational means it's a large scale, right? So that is the actually main difference between Gandhian economics and other kind of economics. तो ସେ ସବୁବେଳେ କହୁଥିଲେ ଏମିତି ସ୍ୱରାଜ କଥା କହୁଥିଲେ, independence or ମାନେ liberty at the individual level, self sufficiency at the village level. If you remember, ସେ ଚାହୁଁଥିଲେ କି ସବୁ village ମାନେ ହୁଅନ୍ତୁ self sufficient ହୁଅନ୍ତୁ, कि village level of economy ମାନେ ସବୁ village ରେ ଯାହା ଦରକାର, he wanted that everything should be produced within the village itself. So each village ସେ ଭାବିଲେ ଯଦି self independent ମାନେ independent ହେଇଗଲା, self sufficient ହେଇଗଲା, then country will develop, right? And can we think of this also as a sort of precursor to Atmanirbhar Bharat? कि only difference is this is the level of, again, level of scale. Scale is here less, here it is the scale is the national level. Otherwise, again, we are also talking about self sufficiency. I'll tell you a very funny thing. There is a very famous dialogue. Okay. If you want to gain new ideas, read old books. Okay. This is a very funny thing, but let me tell you, if you want to have an edge over others in this exam also, try to read some old books, very old books. Okay. Try to understand some concepts like Sarvodaya. Try to understand read some books like Gandhian philosophy किसी पढ़ो, ଭଲ ଲାଗିବ. Okay. And you can use them in exam as well. For example, there is a term called bread leper. Gandhi had taken this concept from Tolstoy, Leo Tolstoy. So Gandhi said that every individual should produce at least a part of his or her food by his hand, by their hand, by own hand. That means ଆମେ ଯାହା ଖାଉଛୁ ତାର କିଛି part we should be able to produce ourselves. Tolstoy ଏଟାକୁ bread labor କହୁଥିଲେ. ଗାନ୍ଧୀ ଏଟାକୁ କଣ କଲେ, ଆମେ ଚलो bread ଏତେ ଖାଉନା, so you can even call it rice labor or some vegetable labor. But anyway, bread labor means ଆମେ ଯାହା ଖାଉଛୁ ତାର କିଛି part ହାତରେ ନିଜେ ହାତରେ grow କରି. Why is this concept important? Because you will learn to respect food. You will learn to respect food, you will learn to respect farmers, and also this kind of manual labor is good for a person, not only physically but also spiritually. Okay. Very, very important. Now you will say, why is it important spiritually? Because take a manual labor you can connect to the nature, right? So spirituality does not mean only religiosity. Spirituality also means to connect with nature. So अल्प किछि हमें vegetable grow करिबा, किछि निज हाथ तैयारी खाया. So this is very important for the character development of the person. Now all of these things you will not find in any textbook. Only when you read some old books, then you will get some new ideas, right? So this was the this is the Gandhian model. So Gandhian model under SN Agarwala कौन suggest कले, agriculture development हो, cottage industry very, very important. जो भी Gandhian concept आसियो, you will see cotton industries. Okay. Sorry, cottage industries. Cottage industries माने small scale industries, जेमती handicraft kind of thing, है ना, cottage industry. ଯେମିତି ସେ ଖଦି କଥା କହୁଥିଲେ, ସେମିତି decentralization. Why? Because again at the village level. So this was a precursor to Panchayati Raj institution. Okay. These were the focus of this Gandhian model. Now the next model suggested was People's Plan by M.N. Roy. Okay. M.N. Roy, if you remember from the history, M.N. Roy कौन ଥିଲେ, କାହାର ମନେ ଅଛି?
the constitution drafting.
He was a communist leader, right? So CPI ro one of the founders, main founders of CPI, Communist Party of India. So that means he was a Marxist socialist principle basis रे तांकर ideology थिला. So तांकर plan भी accordingly it was also Marxist socialist basis रे से गोटे plan suggest करथिले. सो तांकर प्लान कौन थिला कि बेसिक नेसेसिटीज ऑफ लाइफ आम फोकस करिवु लोकन केमती प्रोवाइड करिवु डेवलपमेंट ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर डेवलपमेंट ऑफ इंडस्ट्रीज वेरी वेरी इंपोर्टेंट स्पेसिफिकली ही वांटेड द वेलफेयर ऑफ वर्कर्स ही वाज ए कम्युनिस्ट लीडर राइट सेमती एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेशन ऑब्वियसली माने वर्कर माने जॉब कथा सब हैप्पी ओके वर्कर और फार्मर ए माने होचन मेन फोकस को भी कम्युनिस्ट लीडर राइट so people's plan by MN Roy focused on these things. Now Sarvodaya plan by JP Narayan. Jay Prakash Narayan has given this photo. You know him better as anti-emergency movement ro se founder thile or leader thile sir. Anti-emergency movement ro se leader thile. Okay, Jay Prakash Narayan. तो सीए कौन ही was inspired by again Gandhian philosophy रे से inspired thile. और सर्वोदया model of Vinoba Bhave. Vinoba Bhave himself was a follower of Gandhiji. Okay. एंड सर्वोदयार माने कौन सर्वोदयार माने होची प्रोग्रेस फॉर ऑल सर्वोदया माने समस्त प्रोग्रेस करंदे सो दिस इज आल्सो सॉर्ट ऑफ इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ काइंड ऑफ थिंग दैट दे फोकस्ड ऑन राइट सो इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ एंड पॉलिटिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एट द ग्रास रूट्स लेवल तो पॉलिटिकल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एट द ग्रास रूट्स लेवल माने दे वर अगेन टॉकिंग अबाउट थिंग्स लाइक पंचायत राज किंतु विलेज लेवल ले किंतु स्वराज आनी हुआ ओके सो सर्वोदया प्लान द्वारा सर्वोदया प्लान टा होची कोन की which is a people oriented core people oriented and inclusive growth focused plan so obviously this will then focus on what self sufficiency over focus kariyo it advocated on land reforms specifically on the redistribution of land to the landless you know that why Vinoba Bhave himself was the leader of which movement bhudan and gram bhudan and gramdan movement right we had discussed this आमे ओडिसा लैंड रिफॉर्म्स पार्ट रे भी आमे डिस्कस करथिल are you able to see केमते सब everything is connected right when you read any subject holistically you will be able to connect from different things so land reforms रे आमे पढथिल so बिनोबा भावे को मॉडल द्वारा जति inspired it will obviously be talking about land reforms also redistribution of land to the landless similarly focus on agriculture small and cottage industry देखो गांधीयन मॉडल माने सबुतरे कॉटेज इंडस्ट्री आसी ही आसी decentralized planning why again they are talking about village level le swaraj by they were focusing on decentralized planning so these were all the past plans of India so this is the history of planning एपर्यंत किसी डाउट अछि history of planning what is the meaning of planning what is the goal of planning and what earlier plans we had by the way ए किसी भी practically किसी implement ही नथला but these later on many of these concepts later on became incorporated in the 5-year plans okay so we will see later on कि यार एथरो बहुत सारा concept later on add ही गला हमरो actual planning रे किसी doubts अछि so far
No, sir.
okay ठीक है so let's move on to the 5-year plans so 5-year plans India रे actually आरंभ कोठी हला so we are talking about now of course after 1947 so या पूर्वरु जोडा देखिलु एक्सेप्टिंग द लास्ट प्लान 1950 रे जोडा दिया आइतला एक्सेप्ट दैट आउ सबोडा प्री इंडिपेंडेंस एरा रे थिला सो नाउ वी हैव कम टू द इंडिपेंडेंस एरा सो इंडिया इंडिपेंडेंट हला तापरे हमें भाबिलु कोन करिवु केमति इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट करिवु आमो पाखरे ऑप्शन थिला कोन इदर कैपिटलिस्ट मॉडल और सोशलिस्ट मॉडल तो नेहरू भाई तो सी तो ही इज ऑलवेज वेरी सस्पिशियस हमरो कॉलोनियल हैंगओवर थिला वी डिस्कस्ड अबाउट दिस हैंगओवर माने कोन बहुत बेसी ड्रिंक कर देले नेक्स्ट डे जेमति तुम मुंडा बिंधियो तो आमे सेमते 3 वर्ष धरी हमको टॉर्चर कराइदल तो हम मुंडा बिंधितला तो आमे कैपिटलिस्ट मॉडल काहे की एक्सेप्ट करी सो आमे कहले यूएस यूके ओके सो ब्रिटेन दे आर ऑल द कैपिटलिस्ट कंट्रीज आमे से आमे तांको द्वारा सब्जुगेटेड हेतिलो सो विल नॉट we were exploited by their policy so we will not adopt that kind of policy so distrust of capitalism was there and also there was Nehru's socialist leaning and Jawaharlal Nehru bhai he was already very socialist from beginning socialist you must have seen what a CSP thila right? तार भी से लीडर थे नेहरू एंड सुभाष बोस they were the younger leaders of Congress within the Congress itself they were the radical leftists okay Congress itself was leftist organization but even within that Nehru and Bose were radical leftists right so semanakar socialist leaning thila so therefore after independence they went to where Soviet planning द्वारा ସେମାନେ बहुत attracted ହେଇଗଲେ and ସେମାନେ କହିଲେ कि ଆମେ तो याକୁ ହିଁ follow କରିବୁ. But there is a difference between Soviet planning. So you can understand कि Soviet planning माने कौन, रशिया रो जो planning का थिला सेटा भी सेमतिया long term plan थिला. But the difference between Russian planning and what India adopted was in this thing, whether it is forceful or whether it is democratic. Soviet Russia रे planning का forceful थिला. So this is known as planning by regimentation. Means the people were not given any choice. But Indian planning was more democratic. Means democratically elected government pass କରୁଛି plan plus ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର input ବି ନିଆ ହଉଛି plus यार implementation ରେ ବି ଲୋକଙ୍କର problem ଦେଖାଯାଇକି course correction ବି କରାଯାଉଛି. This is the difference. This is the meaning of democratic planning. In Soviet Russia କଣ रशिया रे decide ହେଇଗଲା government କହିଦେଲା communist government ଏଇଟା କରିବୁ ମାନେ କରିବୁ ଲୋକଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ option ନାହିଁ. So now we will come to the phases of 5-year plans. I have given you in short, okay, in brief, a list of, this is the list of 5-year plans. Now from the targeted growth rate and the achieved growth rate, see, my point is not that you should mug up these figures. Obviously no one can mug up these figures, but I have given you this to understand. First of all, कि जो phase गोटा different phase रे होतला से गोटा को phase रे केतेटा 5-year plan थिला कौन थिला तीनटा major phase रे हिची. Second of all, जेतले later on when you have this note, जेतले आमे को भी phase रो को भी 5-year plan रो आमे evaluate करिवु सेतले मझे मझे याकु चेक जदि करिवो कि तारो केते targeted GDP growth rate थिला और actually केते achieve हला. From that you will overall get an idea whether it was a success or failure. For example, if you see here 5-year plan 3 देखो FYP 3 देखो, okay, 5.5% थिला target, achieve हला 2.5%. So that means what? We can clearly say that it was a failure, right? Similarly, you see 5-year plan, first 5-year plan 2.1% target थिला, achieve हला 3.6%. Target ରୁ ଅଧିକା achieve हला, that means we can clearly say that it was a success, right? किछि कौन कि we cannot clearly say whether it was a success or failure from the data. 4.5% ରୁ ହେଇଗଲା 4.1% target. Success or failure cannot say. Okay. So it's fine, माने medium range रे. But other things you can think, for example, 5-year plan 4 भी देखो 5.7% थिला 3.3% था. So that means it was a failure. Right? But 5-year 6 देखो 5.2% थिला 5.3% achieve हला. So it is fine, it is success, है ना. So यार ये टेबल रो मतलब है कि माने नोट मझरे मझरे रिवाइज करियो, so you can come back and you can see whether which 5-year plan was successful or not. Okay, and को phase रे को plan गुड़ा आसी. So this is giving you a holistic overlook of the plans. That was my point. Okay, बुझी होची.
Yes, sir.
Now come to the summary of 5-year plans. तो ये चैप्टर रे हमें कौन करिवो बहुत डिटेल सब each and every plan को बहुत डिटेल जीवा दरकार नहीं, because as I see, in exam you will not be asked to write about 5-year plan 4 विषय detail लेखो और 5-year plan 9 रे कौन हितला. Okay, no one expects you to write about a single plan. So overall we will see what is the summary of 5-year plans. So first phase हैला 1951 नु 1966. तो first phase रे कौन हला first 5-year plan आसला 1951 नु 56 रे. Okay. So first 5-year plan में कौन हला, it was also known as Harrod-Domar model. Okay. These were the persons who gave this model, Harrod and Domar. So which was under which government? Nehru government, obviously, first government. So first 5-year plan रो theme और objective कौन थिला? Food security. Because our first concern was hunger. Okay. Hunger maximum माने population बहुत high अछि, production बहुत low अछि. So आमे हमारो first priority थिला food security. तो तापे आमे कौन सब important events और achievements कौन हला ये 5-year plan में. तो फूड सिक्योरिटी ପାଇଁ obviously agriculture ର infrastructure ଉପରେ ध्यान दिया जाय. For example, या अंडर बहुत सारा irrigation रो प्रोजेक्ट सब टेक अप करा गला. Land reforms करा गला so that farmers can invest in their land, improve their productivity, and finally import substitution करा गला. Means आमे self sufficient होबाउ चाहूँ food grain production में. Okay. For that reason you will see that food man agriculture sector grew rapidly in the first 5-year plan, and that was also responsible for the success of first 5-year plan. Okay, first 5-year plan is a clear success. 3.6%। आम जी टार्गेट थी आम लो टार्गेट रखी बट टार्गेट रु ऊपर पहुंची गलु। प्रॉब्लम स्टार्ट है एक्चुअली सेकंड 5 ईयर प्लान। सेकंड 5 ईयर प्लान में हमरो कौन टारगेट थिला, दिस वाज व्हाट, दिस वाज द नेहरू महालनोबिस मॉडल। नेहरू वाज द प्राइम मिनिस्टर, पीसी महालनोबिस वाज द इकोनॉमिक एडवाइजर जी की ए प्लान टा देइथिले। तो सी कौन महालनोबिस कौन कले, इफ यू सी विश्वेश्वराय भी अर्लियर सी सेम गोटे आइडिया देइथिले कि हेवी इंडस्ट्रीज को डेवलपमेंट करा जाए, राइट। तो महालनोबिस आल्सो सेड कि गोटे कंट्री सी बिकॉज़ वी हैड लिमिटेड रिसोर्सेस, तो आम पाखे ऑप्शन नहीं कि हम सबुथ इन्वेस्ट कर आम पाखे ऑप्शन नहीं कि आम बिजनेस भी बढ़े पार, स्मॉल स्केल बिजनेस कटेज इंडस्ट्री बढ़ेबू, सेपटे हेवी इंडस्ट्रीज बढ़ेबू, कंज्यूमर गुड्स क्रिएट करू, सब सब जिनस आम पाखे पैसा नहीं। वी हैव ओनली एनफ रिसोर्स टू इन्वेस्ट इन वन सेक्टर प्राइमरीली। So in what is going to be that sector, they decided that this sector should be heavy industries. Why? Because heavy industries first develop कले ही अन्य इंडस्ट्री माने डेवलप करि पारिबे। यदि हेवी इंडस्ट्रीज फर्स्ट डेवलप करिवो नाही ताले अन्य स्मॉलर इंडस्ट्रीज और अदर इंडस्ट्रीज विल नॉट बी एबल टू डेवलप। सो समाने कोन कले सब कंट्री रिसोर्सेस को मेजरली लगे देबे हेवी इंडस्ट्रीज डेवलपमेंट। सो आवर मेन गोल वाज इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन, दैट मींस इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन माने सेल्फ सफिशिएंसी, राइट। सेल्फ सफिशिएंट होबा and what we will do is ki we will develop our heavy industries. So acha eta the socialist pattern of economy, this should not be an achievement, this should be a goal. This is the goal. Import substitution, this is number 1. Heavy industries development number 2. Socialist planning pattern of economy ताको develop करिया number 3 तांकर गोल थिला। तो या अंडर रे आ कोन अचीवमेंट कोन हला, स्टील प्लांट्स किसी सेटअप हला राउरकेला, दुर्गापुर, भिलाई हला, एटॉमिक एनर्जी कमीशन एस्टैब्लिश हला। सो यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड दीज वर द अर्ली डेज ऑफ इंडियन इंडिपेंडेंस एंड दे वर वर्किंग ऑन building some basic infrastructure of the country, right? Then came 5 year plan 3, third 5 year plan asila। थर्ड 5 year plan को कौन कहते, गडगिल प्लान। गडगिल प्लान रो मेन पर्पस कौन थिला हेतले, अगेन फूड सिक्योरिटी एंड सेल्फ सस्टेनिंग इकोनॉमी। नाउ यू विल थिंक व्हाई डू वी हैव फूड सिक्योरिटी, काहे कि हमर प्रॉब्लम आसिला, बिकॉज़ देखो फर्स्ट 5 year प्लान रे फूड सिक्योर आमे टू सम एक्सटेंट वी वर फूड सिक्योर तो ही नथिलु, चलो फूड प्रोडक्शन हमर सफिशिएंट कर देल, बिकॉज़ द फोकस वाज एंटायरली ऑन एग्रीकल्चर। सेकंड 5 year प्लान में देखो एग्रीकल्चर ऊपर बेसी फोकस नथिला, व्हाई less focus on agriculture, because entire focus was on heavy industries। because of that agriculture suffered and agricultural production बहुत कमी गला। पुणी अगेन से फूड इनसिक्योरिटी इंडिया रा आसिला। तो सेति पई थर्ड 5 year प्लान वाला को पुणी हमर टेंशन आसिला कि हम अरे हम लोग खाइयो को केमतिया। then actually this was worsened by the two wars with China and Pakistan। 1962 रे चाइना संगे हम वार फाइट कलु, पाकिस्तान संगे 1965 रे। so already India was food insecure, तापरे पुणी वार आसीवा द्वारा कोन हला फूड प्रोडक्शन आहुरी कमी गला। so this entire plan, again this is why the third 5 year plan is a failure। you will see this is the level of 5.5% to 2.5% amara production hela। so are you able to understand? so this is a story actually, okay। don't think of this ki 5 year plan are mate सब point घोसिया पड़ियो। try to understand ki what was happening, माने हिस्ट्री बेसिस रे कहा पर कोन हला एंड सेति पई यार इंपैक्ट पड़ला ऑन आवर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एंड डेवलपमेंट। सेमिदिया 1965 रे गोटा फेमाइन भी हला, ड्रॉट हला तापर फेमाइन हला। तो ए सब जिंस पई कोन हला, इंडिया हैड टू बोरो फ्रॉम यूएसए some cheap food grains, this was known as PL480। PL480 स्कीम और PL480 ग्रेन कहले हम कोन बुझु, यूएस तार जो डिस्कार्डेड ग्रेन जोडा समान ताकर एनिमल फीड हिसाब रे यूज करथले, समान इंडिया ऊपर दया करके इंडिया को बिक्री कले, ओके। सो दिस वाज वेरी वेरी माने ट्रेजिक सिचुएशन। आई विल टेल यू वन स्टोरी रिलेटेड टू PL480। एक्चुअली सेतेबेलर फूड ग्रेन माने एते लो क्वालिटी थिला कि एंड लोकों पाखरे खाया को नथिला। सो दुर्भिक्ष टाइम रे कोन होला, लोक माने ट्राई करथिले जेते बेसी पारी खाई देबे। एमितिया केस हिची कि लोक माने माने सेविंग न करि पारी, माने केवल विकल ले किसी माने बेसी केमिति हम खाई देबो, सो दैट किछि दिन हमको यू नो 1-2 वीक्स हमको किछि खाया को न पड़ू। सो PL480 खाଇବା से माने जो फूड ग्रेन्स को जबरदस्ती अधिका खाई देथिले, जोटी गवर्नमेंट तांकर आउटलेट रु मिलथिला, एंड अधिका खाଇବା द्वारा भी डेथ हिला किछि लोकंका। बिकॉज से भाभी कि आमे आमे तो घर को भी नहीं पारिबनी, बिकॉज रास्ता रू किए छड़े नहीं जो, तो आमे एठी बसी खाईदू। and ସେଇଠି ତାକୁ ଖାଉ ଖାଉ କିଛି ଲୋକଙ୍କର death ହେଇଯାଇଛି. This was the level of poverty and famine that India had faced. Okay. So because of all of these reasons, India had to borrow from International Monetary Fund. So remember, this is different from 1991. 1991 ଟା ହଉଛି BOP crisis ପାଇଁ ଆମେ borrow କରିଥିଲୁ. ଏଇଟା ତା ଆଗରୁ ବି ଆମେ borrow କରିଥିଲୁ from International Monetary Fund for our food security and to ମାନେ ଆମର expenditure କୁ control କରିବାକୁ, sorry, ମାନେ finance କରିବାକୁ, which was mostly on defense budget, right? So this is one of the earliest borrowings of India from International Monetary Fund. Now we will see a brief evaluation of the first phase. Okay, overall first phase रा हम brief evaluation देखिए. Brief evaluation कौन? First of all, if we talk about Mahalanobis strategy, Mahalanobis strategy was seen in which 5-year plan?
The second.
Oh,
Second.
very good. Second 5-year plan में हमें देखिलु Mahalanobis strategy. सेते कौन हितला? Focus on heavy industries थिला. Heavy industries माने कौन? India large machinery or tools. Okay. Oil and gas in general माने energy sector. Iron and steel. Right. Infrastructure in general, physical infrastructure like building. These are the heavy industries. So this becomes the basis of heavy industry is the basis of all other industries, right? So other industries होची एई उपरटा heavy industry होची तार basis base. So एई जो हमरो प्लान टा थिला महालनोबिस कर आइडिया कोन थिला कि हमें heavy industries को यदि डेवलप करिवु, this will lead to higher investment and this will also lead to development of other sectors of the economy, right? And both of these will lead to surplus, means surplus of resources of the country, which can be used partly in development of other sectors and partly in welfare. Okay. Again, at a co textbook nahi, this is from my own understanding. But if you draw this kind of diagrams, you'll fetch more marks. Okay. This is the Mahalanobis strategy. Right. Now, secondly, यार भी आउ कौन feature थिला first phase रो? Feature थिला गोटे हला active role of the state in the economy. Active role of the state माने obviously private sector टा बेसी develop ही नथिला. So there was a minimal role of private sector. Why? Because of which reason? कहीं की state or state government रो higher role थिला economy रे.
Socialist ପାଇଁ.
Very good. Socialist principle ପାଇଁ. Okay. Socialist leaning of Nehru. सेमटे third गोटे आउ गोटे aspect भी होची, it was an inward oriented policy. Okay. Inward oriented policy माने कौन? Specifically for the development of industries, ସେମାନେ कौन कले? आमर economy was closed. So Indian economy was closed. Why? Because they argued something which is known as infant industry argument. Infant industry argument हला ସେମାନେ कहले कि इंडिया रो जो डोमेस्टिक इंडस्ट्री अछंती, ओके, इंडिया रो डोमेस्टिक इंडस्ट्री एबे दिस इज द nascent इंडस्ट्री और इन्फेंट इंडस्ट्री. nascent माने नुआ नुआ न्यूली मिंटेड इंडस्ट्री. now एबे यदि हमें इकोनॉमी को ओपन अप कर देबु ताले फॉरेन प्लेयर्स जो माने आसीए, ओके, फॉर एग्जांपल चाइना रो जो बिजनेस माने आसले से माने फ्लड कर देबे इंडियन मार्केट एंड हमर इंडियन इंडस्ट्री माने द इंडियन इंडस्ट्री विल बी डिस्ट्रॉयड, which was also I'll accept it was also justified at that time in 1966. Up to 1966 you could make an infant industry argument कि industry हमर infant अछि तो हमको protect करिया दरकार. For that reason our economy was closed. Only in 1991 हमें बाध्य है कि open up करो, otherwise our economy was closed back then. So this inward oriented policy, even though it protected Indian industry, it also led to some problems. Problem एबे कौन कौन ही पारे? Who can tell me? Inefficient market, higher price of goods and services, right? Also low quality goods and services. Why? Because there is नो कंपिटिशन कंपिटिशन जेतले नाही मार्केट रे समस्त जेतले डोमेस्टिक प्लेयर अछंती तो जहा खराब क्वालिटी देले भी हाई प्राइस रे हमें बाध्य किनी so infant industry argument द्वारा although Indian industry was protected to some extent but it also had a bad effect that is market was inefficient and goods and services prices were high, right? So these were some other features of the industry. And yes, finally agriculture initially was the agriculture production जदि first phase रे देखियो initially बढ़िला first 5 year plan ने second 5 year plan third 5 year plan को कमिला पुनी धीरे धीरे increase last को टिके टिके increase करिया start कला. So this is the level of production of agriculture in the first phase, right? Are you able to understand बुझी होची first phase रे कौन कौन है?
Yes.
Right. So let's come to the second
Sir,
phase. हाँ कौन?
એટલે socialist pattern of ଥିଲା ଯୋଉ second 5 year plan ରେ ତାର କିଛି ସେଇଟା କଣ କୁହାଯିବ socialist pattern of society
socialist pattern of society or economy यार माने होची कि देखो socialist pattern माने होची government should own okay most resources and methods of production. How government should when government is owning most resources as well as methods of production, so that means government is controlling the production entire production of goods and services. So government is सब ये जिनस करिवो and government भी ताको लोकों भितरे redistribute करिवो among people it will also redistribute, okay. So that means कि government रो role देखो बहुत ही high. Private sector को there was distrust of the private sector. Why? Because ସେମାନେ ଭାବୁଥିଲେ कि private sector को ଆମେ ଯଦି ଛାଡ଼ି ଦବୁ ताले ସେମାନେ कौन केवल profit maximization ଲାଗିଛି तो लोगों को ସେମାନେ exploit करिवे. This was the thinking. I have told you one example the bread making, okay, bread making factory for a long time even this was reserved for only for public sector. Now you will say कि why should this be reserved? कौन private sector रे एती competency नहीं कि ସେମାନେ bread तैयारी करि परिवे. But that was the kind of thinking. Why? Because of the socialist leaning. So socialist pattern of society or economy माने होची कि गवर्नमेंट सब जिंस कंट्रोल करिवो प्राइवेट सेक्टर रो मिनिमल रोल रहइबो, ओके. प्राइवेट सेक्टर को ସେମାନେ डिस्ट्रस्ट करथले. That is the meaning.
okay
Okay. Now come to the phase 2. Second phase रे कोन हला. Now second phase रे again what are the 5 year plans कहा अंडर रे हितला कोन ऑब्जेक्टिव्स थिला we will see in summarized way we will see. The then it started with 1966 to 69. 1966 to 69 this phase is known as plan holiday. Now plan holiday term रा माने कोन माने होची कि where there is no plan no economic planning, okay. Economic planning माने जोथरे 5 year plan सेथरे स्पेसिफिकली जोथरे नहीं सेटा को हमें plan holiday कहूछ, ओके. ता माने नुहे कि बजेट आसीबानी कि किछि होबन ठीक अछि सेही ईयर रे बजेट भी आसीछि बट प्लान हॉलिडे माने होछि हमें 5 year plan को कंटिन्यू करि पारलु नाही सो वी हैव टू टेक ए ब्रेक. काहे कि हमें ब्रेक नेलु बिकॉज ऑफ द फेलियर ऑफ थर्ड 5 year plan. We had discussed this already. The third 5 year plan was an absolute failure because of a number of reasons, because of wars. 1962 65 रे war हला, okay. So 65 रे war हला परे देखो 1966 और 69 कथा हम डिस्कस करछु. Then secondly हमर फूड इनसिक्योरिटी हला, okay. ड्राउट एंड फेमाइन हवा द्वारा there was food insecurity. लोक माने खाया को पाइले नहीं हमको जो PL480 फूड ग्रेन को इंपोर्ट करिया पड़ला यूएस. सो एते जतले केस हे गला सेतले गवर्नमेंट कहले कि एबे हमें 5 year plan कंटिन्यू करि परिबु नाही. सो दे डिस्कार्डेड a 5 year plan temporarily and they did what माने annually ही तांकर जहा से माने डिसाइड कले कि एई वर्ष हमें एई किछ किछ जिंस करी which is not a 5 year plan. And this period was under लाल बहादुर शास्त्री. तो obviously plan holiday रा objectives कौन रहियो first and foremost रहियो food security because लोक माने खाया को पाउ ना. Second is self defense. Why? Because war already हितला जो 1962 और 65 रे सो हमें डिफेंस ऊपर फोकस करथु. So whatever limited you can think of this period as limited resource अछि हमर मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव दुटा होची गोटा हला हंगर गोटा हला वार, ओके. तो obviously आउ कोनोसी अन्य सेक्टर पय आउ किछ हम पाखरे पैसा ही नहीं एंटायर पैसा इथरे जाउची बिकॉज़ दीज आर द एक्जिस्टेंशियल इश्यूज. हमें फर्स्ट बंचिया तापर तो जा करिया ना. So hunger or war रे मरिबु, hunger रे मरिबु. So our main objective therefore was food security and self defense, right? So important events or achievements under this phase was the impact of wars and famine still continued under the plan holiday. ଏଥିରୁ ମନେ ରଖିଥିବ, ମନେ ପଡୁଥିବ ଲାଲ ବାହାଦୁର ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀ 1966 ରୁ 69 ରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଥିଲେ ସେ ପ୍ରାଇମ ମିନିଷ୍ଟର, link this food security to, remember that story, ଲାଲ ବାହାଦୁର ଶାସ୍ତ୍ରୀ ଯେତେବେଳେ କହିଲେ କି कंट्री को से डिसाइड कले
Yes,
कि
sir.
କହିବାକୁ କଣ କହିଥିଲେ ସେ, ରିମେମ୍बर?
ଗୋଟେ
Good
ଟାଇମ
time.
ଖାଇବା
ଭେରି ଗୁଡ, ଏକ୍ସେଲେଣ୍ଟ। ଗୋଟେ ୱିକ୍ ରେ ଆଟଲିଷ୍ଟ ଗୋଟେ ଓଳି ଆମେ ଖାଇବୁ ନାହିଁ। ଓକେ, ସେ କାହିଁକି କହିଥିଲେ? ବିକଜ ଅଫ ଫୁଡ ଇନସିକ୍ୟୁରିଟି, ଲୋକଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ଫୁଡ ଗ୍ରେନ୍ ହିଁ ଆମ ପାଖରେ ନଥିଲା। ସୋ ହି ବିଫୋର ଟେଲିଂ ଦ ପିପଲ କି ଆମେ ଫାଷ୍ଟିଂ କରିବୁ, ସିଏ ଆଉ ତାଙ୍କ ଫ୍ୟାମିଲି ପ୍ରଥମେ ଫାଷ୍ଟିଂ କରିକି ଦେଖିଲେ କି ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ଓଳି ଫାଷ୍ଟିଂ କଲେ ଆମେ whether we are able to save, whether we are able to do this or not, ଆମେ ନିଜେ ଭୋକରେ ରହିପାରୁଛୁ କି ନାହିଁ। ଯେତେବେଳେ ଦେଖିଲେ ହେଇପାରୁଛି, ତାପରେ ସେ ଯାଇକି ଅଲ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ ରେଡିଓରେ ଯାଇକି ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ରିକ୍ୱେଷ୍ଟ କଲେ କି ଷ୍ଟାର ମାନେ ଫାଷ୍ଟିଂ କର ଗୋଟେ ଗୋଟେ ଓଳି, ରାଇଟ୍? ସୋ ଦିସ୍ ଇଜ ଦ ଷ୍ଟୋରି, ମାନେ ଯୋଉଟା ହିଷ୍ଟ୍ରିରେ ହେଇଥିଲା, ୟୁ କ୍ୟାନ୍ ଲିଙ୍କ ଇଟ୍ ଟୁ ଦ ଇକୋନୋମିକ୍ସ। तो फूड सिक्योरिटी को काउंटर करने पे therefore under लाल बहादुर शास्त्री, some people think that green revolution started under इंदिरा गांधी, but actually लाल बहादुर शास्त्री को regime रे first start ହେଇଥିଲା, इंदिरा गांधी government implemented it in a more efficient way, but it started in लाल बहादुर शास्त्री regiment, okay, sorry, regime. So he started green revolution to meet food scarcity. Therefore also you will, yes, hunger and war ରୁ ମନେ ପଡିଲା, ସେଥିପାଇଁ ତାଙ୍କ ସ୍ଲୋଗାନ ବି କଣ ଥିଲା? ଜୟ ଯବାନ जय किसान, राइट? दिस इज द रीजन, आमर दुईटा ही सेतले मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव थिला, हंगर एंड वार। सो ही स्टार्टेड ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशन टू मीट फूड स्कार्सिटी, एंड देयर वाज आल्सो अ डिवैल्यूएशन ऑफ रूपी टू प्रमोट एक्सपोर्ट। व्हाई डिड वी वांट टू प्रमोट एक्सपोर्ट? एक्सपोर्ट काहे कि शास्त्री जी प्रमोट करे ट्राई करथिले? लॉजिकली थिंक एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स रे हम पढिछु।
ଟିକେ କରେଣ୍ଟ ଆକାଉଣ୍ଟ ଆସିବ ଟିକେ
फॉरेक्स रिजर्व, वेरी गुड। फॉरेक्स रिजर्व रे हमको बेसी दरकार। देखो इंपोर्ट को हमें कमी पारिबु नहीं, बिकॉज़ हमर हेतले एसेंशियल इंपोर्ट हैला ऑयल, पेट्रोलियम ऑयल जहाले भी हमको दरकार। तो इंपोर्ट हमें कौन करिया? डॉलर देकी इंपोर्ट करिया। सो डॉलर मींस हमर फॉरेक्स रिजर्व डिप्लीट हो, कमियो। तो ताको काउंटर करिया पे जहाले भी हमको एक्सपोर्ट करियार अछि, जोथरा डॉलर हमें अर्न करियो। So for that reason, otherwise you will face BOP crisis, right? For that reason, he also promoted exports. Okay, and devaluation of rupee is one of the ways to promote export. Rupee ର value ହିଁ ଯେତେବେଳେ କମିଯିବ, ଲୋକମାନେ import ବେଶୀ କରିବେ ନାହିଁ, export ବେଶୀ କରିବେ, ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ୍ସ ମାନେ, right? ସେମିତି rupee ର value ଯେତେବେଳେ ବଢିଯିବ, ସେତେବେଳେ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ ମାନେ import ବେଶୀ କରିବେ ଆଉ export କମ କରିବେ, right? This is the reason. ଆମେ ତାପରେ फूड ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशन इन जनरल भी यार असेसमेंट रे देखियो, तापर डिटेल फूड रिवोल्यूशन, सॉरी, ग्रीन रिवोल्यूशन माने कोन। देन नेक्स्ट इज द 5 ईयर प्लान। फोर्थ 5 ईयर प्लान में किया आसी गले तळको इंदिरा गांधी आसी गले। तो इंदिरा गांधी को हतला ऑब्जेक्टिव कोन थिला? ग्रोथ विथ स्टेबिलिटी। सेतळको देखो चाइना बाइनारू फोकस शिफ्ट करके सेतळे फोकस वाज एक्चुअली ऑन पाकिस्तान एंड बांग्लादेश। विल सी लेटर ऑन व्हाट वाज द रीजन। एंड इंदिरा गांधी को हतले कोन ऑब्जेक्टिव कोन थिला? इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, माने होची सेल्फ सफिशिएंसी हवा। सिमिलरली शी आल्सो कंटिन्यूड ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन व्हिच वाज स्टार्टेड बाय शास्त्री एरा। देन बैंक नेशनलाइजेशन हला 1969 रे, जेतले बैंक माने अंडर परफॉर्मिंग थिले, पूरा देबालिया हवा को जाउतले। सो गवर्नमेंट टुक ओवर एंड सेड कि 14 टा बैंक से टाइम रे इंदिरा गांधी हैड नेशनलाइज्ड। इंदिरा गांधी गवर्नमेंट से टाइम रे फोर्थ 5 ईयर प्लान आ कोन कले? प्राइवेट पर्स एबोलिशन ही गला। हु कैन टेल मी व्हाट दिस मींस, प्राइवेट पर्स एबोलिशन?
सर जो हमर प्रिंसली स्टेट्स माने देथिले तांकर राजा मन को जोडा दिया होतले।
वेरी गुड। सो सेमानु प्रिंसली स्टेट मान को इंडिया अंडर रे रखिया पे ताको गोटे लांचो हिसाब रे दिया हितला। कैरेट एंड स्टिक पॉलिसी थिला। ओके, मॉडर्न इंडियन हिस्ट्री रे पोस्ट कंसोलिडेशन इंडिया पार्ट भी यू विल गेट टू नो, समृद्धि मैम विल टीच दैट पार्ट, ठीक अछि? तो सेतिरे अछि कि प्राइवेट पर्स जो सरदार पटेल कोन कले, कैरेट एंड स्टिक पॉलिसी फॉलो करथले। प्रिंसली स्टेट मान को आगला कि तुमको आमे गोटे एनुअली गोटे लमसम अमाउंट, गोटे ह्यूज अमाउंट देबो, एंड माने इंडिया भितर तुम इंटीग्रेटेड हेकि रहिले, आ जदि न रहिबो ताले तुम ऊपर एक्शन नो, राइट? पुलिस पठेइ। सो बिकॉज ऑफ दिस कैरेट एंड स्टिक पॉलिसी, प्रिंसेस इनिशियली एग्रीड 1947 रे समस्त मिसिगले इंडिया रे तापर गवर्नमेंट देखला कि एमान जो प्राइवेट पर्सन रे एते ह्यूज अमाउंट आमे लांच दउछु लांच तो नुह चलो ऑफिशियली तांको पेमेंट दिया होछि काहे कि आमे पेमेंट करिवु टैक्स पेयर मनी रो काहे कि तांको आमे दउ ठीक अछि तो तापर कोन कले त माने बंद करि देले so private purse abolition was that abolition of that kind of incentive or that kind of money paid to the princely states similarly sorry 5 year plan of focus with on the development of weaker sections who are the weaker sections adivasis dalits man ko improvement ପାଇଁ and the other important major war in that time was 1972 war the bangladesh liberation war bangladesh liberation war these were the important events under the fourth 5 year plan okay. Now fifth 5 year plan, what is the reason for fifth 5 year plan? Sorry, reason coach. What is the main goal? Growth for social justice. The fifth plan बेलू देखो weaker section ऊपर किसी किसी steps start ହେଇଥିଲା fourth 5 year plan ने fifth और sixth 5 year plan तुम देखियो बहुत सारा social justice और welfare related plan. Remember 5 year plan 5 and 6 are all about social justice, poverty alleviation, is welfare related stuff. ठीक अछि तो सेतला वार फार सब खत्म ही गला सेतला हमें poverty unemployment ए सब जिंस रे फोकस कर तो सेतल को इंदिरा गांधी कोन कले ट्रिकल डाउन थ्योरी और ग्रोथ लेड डेवलपमेंट मॉडल फॉलो करिया स्टार्ट कले इंदिरा गांधी आल्सो सेड कि गरीबी हटाओ ओके poverty eradication so poverty eradication or poverty alleviation programs were taken up poverty alleviation program माने होची PAPs PAPs so ଏଗୁଡା पोवर्टी एलिवेशन प्रोग्राम और जो माने पोर मानक पई जो एम्प्लॉयमेंट स्कीम कोन कोन थिला गोटे थिला 20 पॉइंट प्रोग्राम गोटे थिला मिनिमम नीड्स प्रोग्राम ओके और सम अदर प्रोग्राम्स आल्सो 5 ईयर प्लान 6 रे हमें देखि ए सब जिंस रो किछ डिटेल जिया दरकार नहीं जस्ट नेम ड्रॉप करियार अछि हम एंड फाइनली इट आल्सो दिस एरा आल्सो सॉ the emergency era 1976 emergency was imposed so this is a political part Indian politically you must have read about this right? Emergency era so fifth 5 year plan है यह है economic point of view fifth 5 year plan and sixth 5 year plan are very very important because of their focus on welfare and social justice okay. Now you can link this you can understand the fifth 5 year plan में end वेल का हमें कौन emergency है so emergency पर you know कि जो जेपी नारायण एमन सब जयप्रकाश नारायण सब स्टार्ट कले एंटी इमरजेंसी मूवमेंट जनता गवर्नमेंट लीडर्स जो माने जनता पार्टी रो लीडर्स जो माने व्हिच इज द प्रीकर्सर ऑफ टुडेस बीजेपी जो माने राइट विंग लीडर्स माने थिले से माने इंदिरा गांधी अगेंस्ट मूवमेंट स्टार्ट कले नाउ इंदिरा गांधी मूवमेंट वाज अनपॉपुलर एट दैट टाइम so 1979 to 80 रे जनता गवर्नमेंट जेतले पावर रे आसिला so they did not have any 5 year plan ସେମାନେ 5 year plan implement କରି ହିଁ ପାରିଲେ ନାହିଁ ନା କାହିଁକି କରି ପାରିଲେ ନାହିଁ because of political instability because ସେମାନେ ନିଜେ ବି although ସେମାନେ ବହୁତ କଷ୍ଟରେ ପାवर को ଆସିଲେ ସେମାନେ ଜାଣିଥିଲେ still there was a lot of support for Indira Gandhi within the or if not Indira Gandhi for in general Indian politics କହିଲେ ସେତେବେଳେ କାହାକୁ ବୁଝଉଥିଲା କଂଗ୍ରେସ କୁ ବୁଝଉଥିଲା so just because ଗୋଟେ emergency ଟା ବହୁତ ହି unpopular ଥିଲା for that reason Indira Gandhi was out of power for a while later on she again came back to power so एमाने भी जनता गवर्नमेंट माने भी श्योर नथले कि सेमाने केते दिन पावर रहे एंड तांको भितरे ऑलरेडी टसल चलतिला ओके आ सेमानकर बहुत बेसी मेजॉरिटी भी नथला वेरी थिन मेजॉरिटी रे सेमाने आस्तिले पावर रे so due to these reasons they could not implement 5 year plans therefore they decided to discontinue 5 year plan and started annual plans instead okay जेतले गवर्नमेंट श्योर नाही कि सेमाने केते दिन रहिबे पावर रे सेमाने कोन लॉन्ग टर्म प्लान करिवे कि सेमाने एनुअल प्लान करिया स्टार्ट कले so 1979 to 80 is also known as rolling plan means you are rolling with the times there is no long term plan right? and this plan is also known as gunnar middle plan okay gunnar middle होचंदी it's the economist name of the economist okay तो एतरे बेसिक किछि नाही rolling plan रे बेसिक किछि नाही next we will see the 5 year plan 6 5 year plan में कोन है 6 5 year plan नो फोकस कोन थिला poverty alleviation and infrastructure development again एठी कोन हला कांग्रेस गवर्नमेंट अगेन टू रिटर्न करा तो कांग्रेस गवर्नमेंट आसला पुनी इंदिरा गांधी केम बैक टू पावर याकर कौन फोकस कौन हेगला डायरेक्टेड एंटी पॉवर्टी प्रोग्राम्स. You would have seen in the previous plan that कौन थिला गरीबी हटाओ campaign. So they again started गरीबी हटाओ was very famous slogan actually at that time. तो एटा बहुत obvious है लागू थई पारे कि हां गरीबी को तो हमको हटाई बारी अछि. But at that time लोगों को गोटे revolutionary भलिया लागिला कि वाह the government is so much concerned about us that ସେମାନେ गरीबी हटाइबा को चाहउछन. Okay, Indira Gandhi wants to remove गरीबी. So she started, she knew that there was an appeal for this Garibi Hatao plan. So she started what? Directed anti-poverty programs. Directed anti-poverty programs, IRDP, TWRCA, TRISEM. किसी मन रखा दरकार नहीं DAPP यदि लिखी देला that is enough. Directed anti-poverty programs. Okay. Detail ले किसी जीवा लिखा दरकार नहीं. Scheme रो individual scheme जिनसे लिखा दरकार नहीं. Similarly, there was also a focus on agriculture, industrial development. Okay. Obviously, initially even till now also there is focus on agriculture and industrial development. कौनसी भी 5 year plan विषय यदि किसी लिखिया को चाहूछ आखि बुझी कि दुईटा पॉइंट लिख पारियो फोकस ऑन एग्रीकल्चर फोकस ऑन इंडस्ट्रियल डेवलपमेंट राइट. यदि स्पेसिफिकली किसी प्लान 5 year plan जानछु जोथरे फोकस नथिला फॉर एग्जांपल 5 year plan सेकंड 5 year plan ने हमर फोकस नथिला एग्रीकल्चर ऊपर सेठी लिखियो नाही. Otherwise, you can write in general other 5 year plans. You can some common points you can write agriculture है industrial development है आ 5 year plan 5 6 4 सब social justice equity welfare ये सब जिनस लिख पारियो आखि बुझी. ओके 5 year plan 5 करोड़ फिफ्थ 5 year plan करोड़ राइट. जेतले चैप्टर टा भलो से पढी के रिवाइज कर दो तले बुझी पारियो कि किछि जेनेरिक पॉइंट अछि दैट यू कैन राइट एवरीवेयर राइट. Now India borrowed from IMF again. India has a very simple history actually 1991 पूर्व भी बहुत थरा हमें बोरो करछु IMF रो. बट कथा होछि कि वी हैड सीन दिस कि एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स रो गोटे आमे देखिलु एडवांटेजेस रे देखिलु कि एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स हला परे बीओपी क्राइसिस आउ इंडिया रो ही नै राइट. That is the positive part. But before that, before 1991, India had to borrow from IMF many times. Now, who can tell me in short कि कहीं की बार बार बोरो करा होगला गोटे थरो तो हमें देखिलु कि जेमते वार हला famine हला ई 5 year plan ने कौन ही थई पारे कौन भाबुछ. It's a very simple reason.
गरीबी हटाई कहउथिले से अधिक स्पेंड कर देथिबा.
Very good. गरीबी हटाओ देखो एथरु ही तुमको माने क्यों मिल जाउची गरीबी हटाओ बहुत सारा बेसी वेलफेयर प्रोग्राम बेसी कले कोन हबो विदाउट एनी माने एडिक्वेट अर्निंग सोर्स जदी तुमरो नथिबो ताले स्पेंडिंग सबले अधिक हे जो रेवेन्यू कम हो तो फाइनली कोन हबो तुमरो फिस्कल डेफिसिट आउटकम ऑफ दिस इज हाई फिस्कल डेफिसिट. फिस्कल डेफिसिट जब बहुत हाई हे जो फाइनली तुम बाध्य हबो बाहर बोरो करिया. लॉजिकली सब जिंस बुझी पारियो when you combine history with economics. Then 5 year plan 7th 5 year plan no कौन focus थिला food grain and employment. That means food security and jobs. This was the main focus of 7th 5 year plan. ना आउ कौन हितिला या अंडर रे एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन हला देखो जेतल भी बाहरु बोरो करियो गवर्नमेंट सेतल किछि टाइम पे सचेत થઈ जिवो कि हमको एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन करियार अछि. पुनी एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन करी कि किछि फॉरेक्स रिजर्व आसी हला पुन से माने स्पेंड करिया को लागि. Entire economic history is like that only right. Export promotion करिया को सब फोकस हला. Then doubling of food grain production. Okay, food grain को केमिति हम डबल करी प्रोडक्शन वैल्यू केमिति बढ़ी जवाहर रोजगार योजना JRY. This was one of the early precursors of wage employment schemes of India. Wage employment scheme. Then long term fiscal policy start hitla या अंडर. Long term fiscal policy माने government budgeting for the माने not only for annual plan but also overall 3 year 4 year 5 year या बेसिस रे हमरो कोन विजन कोन अछि 3 year पर कोन करियार अछि गवर्नमेंट. तो एई सब जिंस 7th 5 year plan ने आसी. This is different from overall economic planning. Okay, 5 year plan थारु एटा different. 5 year plan ने कोन सब किछि इकोनॉमी रो होलिस्टिकली यू आर प्लानिंग. This is something we are talking about specifically fiscal policy. Fiscal policy माने गवर्नमेंट बजटिंग. Okay. Then 1985 or 1990 before that, around a decade before that. Okay, so you can talk about for example 1980 to 1990 एई रेंज रे. Okay, हमर कोन हला गोटे हिंदू रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ वाली गोटे इकोनॉमिस्ट कृष्ण राज और राज कृष्ण he had given a term called Hindu rate of growth. Hindu rate of growth माने कौन सी कहली कि पीरियड रे अराउंड 3% आमर एवरेज जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट रे इंडिया ग्रो करूछ. एवरेज जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट 3% मींस इट इज वेरी लो. सो ये जो वेरी वेरी लो रेट रे इंडिया ग्रो करूछ यार नाम से देले हिंदू रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ मींस वेरी लो रेट ऑफ ग्रोथ. ओके, so this was his criticism. It was a criticism where कहले कि Indian economy is not growing as fast as we had expected. This was his criticism. Okay, এটা Hindu rate of growth, it might be asked in prelims. They can ask you in prelims. Okay, mains रे usually that will not be asked. Now ये सब जिनसे सरला पर कौन हला 1990s रे we had read in LPG reforms. LPG reforms और background रे हमें देखी थिलु. If you remember कि around 1990 रे कौन हला इंडिया रो बैलेंस ऑफ पेमेंट बहुत ही डिप्लीट करियाला. Okay, the reasons we had seen yesterday. What are the reasons? Because government profligacy बहुत अधिक expenditure करते. Import bill was very high because oil तो हमको import करिया रहे हैं ही अच्छी. But सेपटे कौन हला import high थिला but export very low थिला. तो यार outcome कौन हला balance of payment crisis ही गला. So because of balance of payment crisis 1990 to 1992 रे हमें 5 year plan implement करी पारलु नहीं. Instead we had what plan holiday माने where 5 year plan जोठी break रे जाइछि. Okay, so हमें कहे कि plan एबे holiday रे अछि ता माने plan हमें करू ना. So FYPs are not being implemented. No FYPs. Instead of 5 year plan, we are implementing annual plans. Okay, 1990 to 1991, 1991 to 1992. Right? Because of BOP crisis at one hand, political instability on the other hand. If you remember, ମୁଁ କହିଥିଲି कि balance of payment crisis ହେଇଥିଲା Morarji Desai government under रे, and he had also started this airlift. RBI जो airlift करतला gold UK को जो गोल्ड प्लेज करिकी आमे यूके सॉरी आईएमएफ को आमे पैसा आनिल है ना $2.2 बिलियन आमे आनिल. बट फाइनली एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स जो पॉलिसी गुडा को इंप्लीमेंट करिया को पीवी नरसिम्हा राव गवर्नमेंट आसे त माने बहुत ही शॉर्ट पीरियड रे दुई तीनटा गवर्नमेंट एमते चेंज हितले से टाइम रे दुई तीनटा नो मोरारजी देसाई यस देन आफ्टर दैट देयर वाज नरसिम्हा राव. व्हाई बिकॉज़ फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम कांग्रेस गवर्नमेंट अछि बट कांग्रेस माने गांधी गोटे सरनेम वाला लोक लीडर नाही. देयरफॉर देयर वाज पॉलिटिकल इंस्टेबिलिटी, राइट, when some other leaders of Congress were the prime ministers. So rest of these part, LPG reforms ହେଇଥିଲା, so you can refer to the previous chapter. Okay, first generation reforms. Now overall ଆମେ ଦେଖିବୁ କି evaluation of phase 2 of planning. Second phase of planning ର overall evaluation କଣ? First of all, ଏଥିରେ କଣ ହେଲା ଆମେ food security ଉପରେ discuss କଲୁ. Food security ଉପରେ sorry focus କଲୁ. So we are talking about the green revolution. Green revolution ର hallmark କଣ? तीनटा और चारिटा हॉलमार्क अछि. गोटा हला इट यूजेस हाई यील्ड वैरायटी सीड्स. सेकंड हला केमिकल इनपुट यूज करा जाए. केमिकल इनपुट्स माने फर्टिलाइजर्स एंड फर्टिलाइजर्स एंड पेस्टिसाइड्स. थर्ड इज की इरिगेशन, आर्टिफिशियल इरिगेशन यूज करा जाए. फोर्थ इज की टेक्नोलॉजिकल अपग्रेडेशन. ये सब जिनस को यूज करके फूड प्रोडक्शन एंड प्रोडक्टिविटी को इंक्रीज करा जाए. Production and productivity is increased. This is the meaning of food security. Green revolution. Okay. And who was the father of green revolution in India?
MS
Very MS Swaminathan. Now the other part, आउ कौन कौन हितला या अंडर रे trickle down theory ऊपर फोकस करा हितला. But trickle down theory it was not as successful as we expected. Okay, एते सक्सेसफुल नथिला जते हम एक्सपेक्ट करते. सेमिति आउ कोन हला डायरेक्टेड एंटी पॉवर्टी प्रोग्राम्स बहुत सारा टेकअप करा. ओके, एफआईपी 5 और एफआईपी 6 अंडर रे फॉर एग्जांपल किछि वेज एम्प्लॉयमेंट प्रोग्राम जोडा कि आजिरो एनआरईजीएस फॉर एग्जांपल किछि सेल्फ एम्प्लॉयमेंट प्रोग्राम लोक माने समाने निजे ही बिजनेस स्टार्ट करन ए सब इनसे टेकअप करा हला. गोटे मिनिमम नीड्स प्रोग्राम. वेज एम्प्लॉयमेंट प्रोग्राम वन एग्जांपल इज देयर मन पड़छि नेशनल रूरल एम्प्लॉयमेंट प्रोग्राम बोली गोटे स्कीम बाहर थला से टाइम इंदिरा गांधी गवर्नमेंट एनआरईपी. So these were all directed anti-poverty programs, specifically poverty alleviation programs, PAPs, PAPs. Okay. So DAPPs or PAPs, they were started in FYP 5 but implemented well or focus बेसी थिला FYP 6 रे 6th FYP introduction हिला FYP 5 रे okay similarly so this was एटा होची से जो गरीबी हटाओ स्लोगन पे आउ कोन फीचर थिला ई फेज रो there was also outward oriented policy माने आगरो एमदी फर्स्ट फेज रे रिमेंबर फेज 1 रे कोन थिला इनवर्ड ओरिएंटेड पॉलिसी फेज 2 रे कोन हला आउटवर्ड ओरिएंटेड पॉलिसी माने हम केमते जानछु एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन पे राइट and also there was for the first time opening up of the economy 1991 रे right therefore it is known as outward oriented policy India was no longer inward oriented how kon hitla social justice in general social justice under you can write a few points women ST SC OBC eman ko upare focus thila some generic points you can write our LPG reforms overall the LPG reforms hitla so you can refer to the previous chapter related to this these were the some of the overall evaluation of phase 2 कार किछ डाउट अछि प्लीज आस्क any doubts in phase 2 second phase planning रे कोन कोन हितला ठीक अछि then let's move on to the last phase आज हम जल्दी सार दो 9टा अराउंड सार दो सेतपे मु टिके लेटर भी 7:15 अराउंड स्टार्ट कली बिकॉज़ बहुत बेसी किछ नाही छोटा टॉपिक टा so we are not going to have any breaks let's try to finish it bit early so that you can then go home and do other things you know? By the way how many hours in general are you studying right now kete podi parcho let's say 6 hours 8 hours 10 hours or 4 hours a range re kahar kete range can you tell me
so मोर 6 ରୁ 8 ଭିତରେ ଯାଉଛି ବେବେଳେ ପାରି ଯାଉଛି
very good so this is a very excellent who else Sai Krishna how many hours per day what do you think how many hours per day are you able to study
Sir, same 6 to 8 hours depending on office work.
okay who else Subhasri
Sir, 8 to 10 hours.
अरे पूरा आउटस्टैंडिंग है आउटस्टैंडिंग बहुत वाला who else देखो एठी तुम भितरे कंपटीशन देखछ त who else 10 hours ऊपर किए 12 hours के अछ I don't know but I have myself once or 1 day or 2 days maximum I think I have just to make a record I have tried and I have studied for 12 hours but otherwise I don't think this is possible it's not humanly possible okay maximum usually mu 8 hours ही पढ़े sorry usually 6 hours around पढ़े at max body body usually 8 hours पर्यंत भी किछि किछि दिन जाईची but 10 or 12 hours it's bit too much for me what I'm trying to tell you is ki right now you can focus on 8 hours target करके चलो 8 hours score को 6 hours हे गेला then also it is fine 8 hours तो बहुत बेसी निजो को प्रेशराइज करके 10 to 12 hours करियार पॉइंट किछि नै because it gives you diminishing returns ए बडा returns मिले right जते एंथि नंबर ऑफ hours बढ़ियो this is somewhere around 8 hours याठर अधिक कोन पढिले this is the value or output you are getting याठर अधिक पढिले बहुत बेसी आउटपुट मिलियो ना एमिति एति अल्प किछि मार्जिनल यूटिलिटी बहुत कम अछि so I have this rule of 8 this is my own rule okay rule of 8 कोन 8 hours study 8 hours sleep 8 hours others thing 8 hours study को टारगेट कले एक्चुअली मे बी सेटा 7 घंटा ही पारे 6 hours ही पारे बट टारगेट फॉर 8 hours okay 7 घंटा 6 घंटा रो इन जनरल इट शुड नॉट रिड्यूस ओके बट पॉइंट इज कि यू शुड बी कंसिस्टेंट कंसिस्टेंट हबो दिने हे गला 6 घंटा दिने हे गला 8 घंटा देन इट इज फाइन बट एमितिया हबा उचित न कि दिने हे गला 10 घंटा पढि देलो तापर 4-5 दिन किछि पढलन तापर पुणी 10 घंटा पढ़ला सो दिस इज बैड ओके ए कंसिस्टेंट पढ़ाटा बेटर राइट ठीक है नाउ लेट्स कम टू द फेज 3 पार्ट फेज 3 ऑफ प्लानिंग या अंडर कौन कौन हितला लेट्स सी सो
सर
एफवाईपी
गोटे डाउट
हाँ हाँ प्लीज आस्क
सर एक्चुअली जीएस एसए और ऑप्शनल में सेतरा पेपर है तो दिन रे कौन केमिति माने सब पेपर टिके टिके पढ़िया कथा ना गोटे दिटा पेपर पर फोकस कर ले
Okay, we will take this up. Let's take 10 minutes around after the class to discuss overall किसी एमती टॉपिक ऊपर डिस्कस करिया ओके मतलब पचारे
ओके
just remind me after class okay we will discuss after this okay phase 3 अंडर रे कौन कौन हला ना फर्स्ट असला फिस्कल ईयर फर्स्ट असला फिस्कल ईयर सॉरी 5 ईयर प्लान 8 दिस इज द राव एमएमएस मॉडल राव एमएमएस माने पीवी नरसिम्हा राव एंड मनमोहन सिंह I had shown you that photo LPG reforms रे भी गोटे फोटो दिया मन पड़ुची 1991 रिफॉर्म्स टाइम रे हु केम पीवी नरसिम्हा राव गवर्नमेंट आसला आउ तांकर फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर थिले मनमोहन सिंह राइट सो सेमाने दे ब्रॉट इन द एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स वाज ब्रॉट इन तो यार ऑब्जेक्टिव कौन कौन थिला बिकॉज़ दैट वाज द इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस पीरियड थिला तो एमानकर ऑब्जेक्टिव कौन कौन थिला फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी आई हैव नॉट रिटन दिस बट मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी overall stability of the economy that was the first and mane foremost objective second was poverty elimination infrastructure employment local self government very important who actually brought in the 73rd and 74th amendment 1992 re hitla this was done by pv narasimha rao okay and seta local self government part re polity de maybe Subham sir had taught you or not the history of the देखियो से बहुत ही नरसिम्हा राव वाज अ वेरी acute politician very good negotiator तो सी सब स्टेट मान को बापुरे धन रे कहि बुझे कि एंड से कौन कले बहुत सारा कॉम्प्रोमाइज करी फॉर एग्जांपल ही सेड कि जो 73rd एंड 74th अमेंडमेंट देखियो बहुत सारा प्रोविजन होची वॉलंटरी प्रोविजन स्टेट मान को कहले कि तुम इच्छा तुम यदि इंप्लीमेंट करियो कि न करियो बट फॉर द टाइमिंग लेट्स इंप्लीमेंट इट so he knew that he had the vision that if we implement it first then gradually it will solidify gradually धीरे धीरे जोड़ा voluntary provision अच्छी next government माने ताकि भी compulsory कर देगा so because of his political understanding also this thing 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment came to be so local self government was one of his major priorities also and last part is economic growth obviously why because he also believed in trickle down theory ଯେତେବେଳେ ଗୋଟେ कंट्रीର इकोनॉमी डेवलप करिया ସେତେବେଳେ ଲୋକଙ୍କର शेयर भी डेवलप करिया तो या अंडर इंपोर्टेंट इवेंट्स और अचीवमेंट्स कौन कौन हैला एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स ऑब्वियसली फर्स्ट जनरेशन रिफॉर्म्स या पाही तो से माने आसले पावर को बीओपी क्राइसिस थिला बोले से माने पावर को आसले देन सेकंडली he also started disinvestment of PSUs remember this disinvestment started under which कहाँ अंडर स्टार्ट हला नरसिम्हा राव अंडर अरे where should I write this so disinvestment started under the PV Narasimha Rao government and privatization started under whose government you can say Modi ji which prime minister
सर मोदी जी
nah Atal Bihari Vajpayee time to start it Modi ji has accelerated all these things okay? Modi ji is like ultra pro max तो गोटे आईफोन गोटे वर्जन थी तार अल्ट्रा प्रो मैक्स है this person but actually it had started much earlier this investment started from PV Narasimha Rao era and after that privatization started from Vajpayee era so if you see disinvestment is like the first step तापर हला privatization तापर तो चलो private sector रोल बड़ी बड़ी okay so 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment happened population control measures also started in this era and finally something which started under 1992 or 19 plan indicative planning okay now why is this called indicative planning बड़े maybe prelims रे भी पचरा जी पारे किसी conceptual question economy रे भी पचरा जी पारे so this is also one concept indicative planning माने होची indicative planning is as contrasted with directive planning or mandatory planning directive planning और mandatory planning माने होची कि जो थरे state और जो हमारो government सी कौन करियो सेट करियो कोटा और टार्गेट्स माने टार्गेट सेट करियो द गवर्नमेंट आ से जबरदस्ती कहब सब सेक्टर मान टू फुलफिल दैट टार्गेट राइट किंतु इंडिकेटिव प्लानिंग रे कौन हबो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट सॉरी स्टेट कौन करियो स्टेट माने होची गवर्नमेंट राइट सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट स्पेसिफिकली सो इट विल प्रोवाइड इन्फ्लुएंस सब्सिडी ग्रांट तमारे इंसेंटिव्स प्रोवाइड करा हबो फॉर द प्राइवेट सेक्टर टू achieve its targets. So in both indicative planning and directive planning, government has in its mind some ideas कि किसी target हमको fulfill करियार अछि. But कौन directive planning रे government force करियो private sector को से target fulfill करिया को, but indicative planning रे कौन force करा बनी, तांको incentives दिया हो, right? So obviously that is a more democratic. That means it is a more democratic planning, democratic way of conducting business. Right? So indicative planning, it is said that they had started from FY8 या पूर्व usually आमे को directive planning plans गोटा सब थिला या परटू सब indicative planning and say same pattern follow कला next plan गोटा रे जेतो गवर्नमेंट रियलाइज कले कि आमे किछि फोर्स करिया कथा नै आमे rather incentive through रे we can promote or we can encourage the private sector to achieve our targets. Next asla fiscal sorry 5 सब fiscal year कहि दोछि 5 year plan 9 okay. So this plan एटा होछि एबे अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी आसे 9th 5 year plan so तांको अंडर रे कोन हला तांको पूर्व इफ यू रिमेंबर सेकंड जनरेशन रिफॉर्म्स 1990 एंड रे हम डिस्कस करथिलु स्टार्ट हेतिला व्हिच के फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर के थिले who had discussed second generation reforms who had introduced
Manmohan Singh.
यशवंत सिन्हा second generation reform LPG reforms note re dekho second generation reforms or legislative reforms that was started by Yashwant Sinha. He was the finance minister under Vajpayee government, right? So second generation reforms or आमे जोड़ा को legislative reforms कहूँ including labor reforms that started under Vajpayee government. Okay. So समिति SGSY PMGSY प्रधानमंत्री ग्राम सड़क योजना okay. स्वर्ण जयंती रोजगार योजना और समथिंग मोर मने पड़ुनी SGSY टा कोन कार मने अछि I forgot और hang on a second
ग्रामीण स्वर्ण जयंती रोजगार योजना
हाँ स्वर्ण जयंती ग्राम स्वरोजगार योजना ओके लंबा नाम टा अछि मने मने पड़ियोनी एते जिंस SGSY you can simply write okay एटा होछि स्वर्ण जयंती ग्राम स्वरोजगार योजना एटा बहुत लंबा नाम बट एनीवे SGSY और PMGSY ये सब जिंस स्टार्ट हला गोल्डन क्वाड्रिलेटरल जानिथियो जो इंडिया को भारत माला प्रोजेक्ट एक्चुअली एटा प्रिकर्सर हला गोल्डन क्वाड्रिलेटरल कि इफ दिस इज इंडिया हमें ताको इंडिया को एमितिया नेशनल हाईवे द्वारा कनेक्ट करियो बोली ओके सो मने पड़छि वाजपेयी एरा रो इफ यू हैव आई मीन इफ यू हैव ग्रोन अप इन वाजपेयी एरा you would have remembered these things I mean I grew up in that era so I remember स्कूल चले हम मने अछि से जो आस्तला एडवर्टाइजमेंट से सब वाजपेयी गवर्नमेंट
Yes,
टाइम रखला
yes
Bharat
that was
Vidya.
I'll tell you a very personal thing okay I'm a really big fan of Vajpayee and the reason was that before this era I remember before 2002 or something हमें कहीं usually prime minister के जानी भी नथी Vajpayee was a very charismatic prime minister and for the first time we felt I personally felt कि as if India is changing India shining गोटे जो ad से मैंने start कले स्कूल चले हम itself से जो campaign टा थिला कि पिला मान को स्कूल को नबा because there were many school dropouts so सेमान को हमें through देखो इंडिकेटिव प्लानिंग परठू केमतिया जिंस आसला गवर्नमेंट धीरे धीरे सब एनकरेज कले समस्त लोक मान ओके गवर्नमेंट वाज नॉट फोर्सिंग एनीवन इंदिरा गांधी एरा देखियो तो सब जिंस फोर्सफुल थिला बट आफ्टर दैट ए जो बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट जो सही टाइम रे आसला दे वर नॉट फोर्सफुल दे वर ट्राइंग टू bring together people and they were encouraging people right golden quadrilateral थिला से स्कूल चले हम कैंपेन थिला ओके ए सब जिंस कोन हला फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम इंडिया शाइनिंग ए जो कैंपेन स्टार्ट हला so there was a hope कि India can change and India can develop. Okay. For that reason, I'm very personally very big fan of Vajpayee ji. Then privatization of PSUs also started. Okay. We discussed this. कि disinvestment started under Narasimha Rao government. Privatization started under Vajpayee government. तापरे किछि basic minimum BMS stands for basic minimum services. Okay, चलो एठी लिखा अछि basic minimum services. बेसिक मिनिमम सर्विसेस माने जोटा हमें बेयर नेसेसिटीज ऑफ लाइफ कहूछु वाटर एजुकेशन ए सब जिंस ऊपर गवर्नमेंट रो स्कीम्स बाहर एसटी एससी वुमेन माने सोशल जस्टिस ओके सो सोशल जस्टिस वाज आल्सो फोकस्ड बाय द वाजपेयी गवर्नमेंट सो कौन फोकस थिला गवर्नमेंट रो सेल्फ एम्प्लॉयमेंट जोटा होची स्वर्ण जयंती ग्राम स्वरोजगार योजना एसजीएस वाज दिस infrastructure development which was what PMGSY Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana as well as this golden quadrilateral project, right? Basic minimum services, social justice, these were the main focus of the Vajpayee government. Okay. What else? The next 5-year plan is the 10th 5-year plan. 10th 5-year plan below again UPA government ଆସିଗଲା 2002 around, if you remember Manmohan Singh was the prime minister. So this is the UPA government. Let me write this. UPA government ଆସିଗଲା ତ power को again because Vajpayee government गोटे टर्म कंप्लीट କରିଥିଲା ତା ଆଗରୁ आई थिंक ବର୍ଷ ରୁ 2 ବର୍ଷ ସେମାନେ ଥିଲେ ପାୱାର ରେ ତାପରେ ତାଙ୍କ ଯୋଉ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ଭାଙ୍ଗିଲା 5 ବର୍ଷ ପାଇଁ ପାୱାର ରେ ଆସିଲେ ତାପରେ ପୁଣି again there was UPA government. now UPA government ର କଣ ଫୋକସ ଥିଲା poverty alleviation, employment generation, gender gap को address କରିବା means women ମାନଙ୍କ ଉପରେ ଫୋକସ ଆସିଲା, health care, so some generic points ଯାହା ମାନେ 9th 10th sorry 10th 11th 12th is यार अंडर रे जहाँ जहाँ सब जिंस अछि छि जेनरिक पॉइंट अछि which is still ongoing. So the same point you can recycle within this thing, no one will know. Okay, similar points. So poverty ए पछरे भी सब देखियो agriculture, infrastructure, education, inclusive growth, poverty alleviation, employment ए सब जिंस. Now या अंडर major achievements कौन थिला services led growth. Manmohan Singh government, if you remember, why is the Manmohan Singh government famous for? That is famous for economic growth. High GDP growth rate was very very high in this period because 2007 ପରେ କଣ 2008 ରେ କଣ ଆସିଲା global financial crisis, right? So before that India was growing at a very high pace. Remember 8.7 around 7 to 8 around range रे ଆମେ grow करथिलु average GDP growth rate, and one of the major drivers of that growth was actually services sector, not agriculture, not industries. Why? Because initially the IT industry was growing at a rapid pace. है ना LPG reforms से सब जिंस में हमें डिस्कस कर चुके. We had discussed about globalization. We had discussed about outsourcing. Outsourcing under रे मुझे गोटे टाउन कहते हैं Bangalore, right? So services led growth. That was a time when TCS, Infosys वाला कंपनी माने rapidly grow कले. एबे तो बहुत saturated है गलानी. सेताले because सेताले बेसिक competitors नथले. आउ एम्प्लॉयर माने एम्प्लॉई हवा ପାଇଁ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର ଅଭାବ ନାହିଁ. Educated Indian youth अछि and there is a lack of market upon the saturate ହେଇନି. So यार फायदा नहीं कि TCS, Infosys वाला कंपनी माने rapid grow करे and तांकर जो profit ଆସିला that contributed to the massive GDP growth rate. Okay, 8% around or even more than 8% around 2002 to 7 ଭିତରେ. Then poverty alleviation to a great extent. Okay? Jobs creation. Why? Because ଏଇଗୁଡ଼ା ସବୁ ହିଁ ତ ଥିଲା ନା ସବୁ ତାର target ଥିଲା. NREG is very very important. NREGA was the first time introduced under this UPA government. Okay. NRHM टा National Rural Health Mission, right? Yeah, I think health. So NRHM and NREGS, these two were the major flagship schemes. These were the flagship schemes of the UPA government. Okay. So this is the 10th 5-year plan. Now let's come to the 11th 5-year plan. 11th 5-year plan ने कौन हला? This is the UPA 1 government. 11th 5-year plan बेलकु UPA 2 government थिला, right? So 11th 5-year plan नो focus कौन थिला? Agriculture, infrastructure, education. Agriculture, infrastructure and education. ना या अंडर कौन major achievements और major events कौन हला? Global financial crisis आसीला immediately after 2007 in 2008. We had discussed in LPG reforms रे हम डिस्कस करथिलु फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस केमती इंडिया ऊपर काहे इम्पैक्ट पकेला बिकॉज़ हमर इकोनॉमी सेतरा ओपन अप हे गेथला. सेम द हेल्थ एंड एजुकेशन भी इंप्रूव कला because why? Because the goal was also education and health. Okay? Education and health, skill development to a certain extent. Okay? Some generic points. एथरे कोन GDP growth rate was still significant but it slowed down a bit, slowed from the previous 5-year plan. FYP tend to slow down ହେଇଗଲା because of global financial crisis. Okay. And lastly, this is the last 5-year plan that we had. This is the 12th 5-year plan. କାହିଁକି 12th 5-year plan, if you see, this was the time was 2012 ରୁ 2017 यार time period ଥିଲା. But 2014 ରେ एनडीए गवर्नमेंट ଯେତେବେଳେ यूपीए 2 गवर्नमेंट को हरेकी एनडीए गवर्नमेंट पावर रे आसिला 2014 ରେ ସେମାନେ आसी कोन कले प्लानिंग को ही एंड कर देले. ओके, सो 5-year प्लानिंग abolished. So therefore ए जो 5-year प्लान टा 12th 5-year प्लान टा एक्चुअली अधारे अटकी गला 2012 ରୁ 14 चली अटकी गला. बाकी तापरटे ସେମାନେ कोन कले नीति आयोग को प्लानिंग कमिशन वाज रिप्लेस्ड बाय नीति आयोग. So after Niti Aayog, coming of Niti Aayog, there has been no more 5-year plan. The 12th 5-year plan was the last plan. Okay. So but before that, UPA government 2012 रे जेतल समाने पावर रे थिले समाने तांकर कोन 5-year plan रो कोन ऑब्जेक्टिव थिला. This is the objective or this was the theme: faster, sustainable and inclusive growth. Okay. In general देखो किछि भी थीम मन रखिया तुमरो दरकार नहीं, but I'll say कि ए थीम टा को प्रीलिम्स पर्सपेक्टिव रो मन रखियो. They can ask you directly कि what was the objective of 12th 5-year plan. Okay, so ये जो गोटे single नारा faster, sustainable and inclusive growth, that can be asked in prelims. Okay. Prelims question गोटे. So Modi government discontinued planning commission was replaced by Niti Aayog. Demonetization हला, GST regime हला, blah blah, all of that 2017 पर्यंत जहाँ हितला, you can write those things. Okay, ये 5-year plan under कौन कौन हला, right? Economic perspective mostly. Otherwise, if you can think of some major event which also impacted Indian economy, you can write under 12th 5-year plan. Now we will see what is the evaluation of third phase of planning. What is the evaluation overall? Okay. First, I am going to economic reforms. This was a continuous economic reforms continued in third phase also. Okay. So that means second generation, for example, second generation reforms. Second generation or legislative reforms. Right. I had told you another thing: economic reforms is not a one-time event, right? Economic reforms is something which should be continuous, right? So this is the meaning: economic reforms continue, second generation reforms. After that also it is still continuing. What is the next thing? Indicative planning continued. Indicative planning was the first time was also introduced here, phase 3 re. Indicative planning mane kon? Who can tell me what is the meaning? On a state or the government encouraging private sector to achieve its goals. This is the meaning. बुझी होची ना नहीं?
Yes, sir.
What else? There was also development of industries. Industrial development both hitla. In fact, industries plus services. Yeah, services due to these two factors. Okay, our GDP growth rate a time ro average GDP growth rate was somewhere around 6 to 7%. A range रे grow करथिला. Specifically 2002 ରୁ 7 ଭିତରେ तो huge rate रे around 8 to 9% rate रे grow करथिला. But overall a range भितर phase 3 is a bit longer period. So a longer period रे हमें 6 to 7% rate रे grow करथिलु because of development of industries and services. Okay, specifically services led growth after 2000s. This was driven by what? India's IT sector. Okay, and again India's IT sector, why was this successful after 2000? Because 1991 re opening up of economy hitla. So opening up of economy mane Indian economy now become integrated with global economy, which is also known as globalization. Okay. So यार impact पड़ला Indian IT sector बहुत huge develop कला, IT sector grow कला बोली, services sector रो contribution बढ़ी गला GDP को. For that reason GDP growth rate was very high. Okay. However, despite these two things, remember India also faced a problem of jobless growth. माने देखो GDP grow करची 6 to 7% रे, but employment was not in proportionate manner. So employment still remained low. So this is what kind of problem of the economy? This is known as the structural issues of Indian economy. এটা ଏବେ ବି ଆମର persist କରୁଛି Indian economy. GDP grow କରୁଛି, economy grow କରୁଛି, but jobs create ହେଇପାରୁ ନାହିଁ. So this started from as early as phase 3. Vajpayee government or even before that also we are having jobless growth. Right? Narasimha Rao government time. What else? Then foreign investment. If we talk about foreign investment also grew. Okay. For example, FDI, FII, eguda bhi growth hela India. Why? Again, because of opening up of economy. आगुरी तो फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट आसी ही पार नथला. एबे इकोनॉमी ओपन अप हैला हेताळे एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स आसला हेताळे तो तापरे फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट आसीवा स्टार्ट हला. राइट. What else? Yeah, remember services sector. Let me tell you another thing. Services sector सेतले केते sectoral growth rate थिला do you know? Services sector रो CAGR थिला around 10%. That means huge rate of growth. Okay, only that sector कथा कहूची. Overall GDP थिला 6 to 7%. What else? Then global financial crisis we discussed. So यार impact पड़ला phase 3 रे कि slow down Indian economy. It annoyingly Indian economy would have sustained for maybe 7 to 8% for a longer period of time. Right. And finally, end of planning, and this was replaced by Niti Aayog. Planning Commission was replaced by Niti Aayog. Okay. This is the evaluation of phase 3. Now, if you have any doubts, please ask. If there is a doubt, phase 3 there is a doubt, please ask. Any doubts?
No, sir.
Okay. Then we'll come to the last topic of the day, end of planning and Niti Aayog. तो एटा सब फैक्चुअल एटा बहुत ही फैक्चुअल जिंस बेसी किछि हिंदी रखो कांसेप्ट बहुत बेसी नहीं सो विल बी एबल टू फिनिश दिस बिट अर्ली. ठीक है. सो आगरु कोन होतला प्लानिंग कमीशन करथला प्लानिंग करथला. राइट. Planning Commission was neither a statutory body nor a constitutional body. It was set up by an executive order of the government in 1950. Okay. Similarly, Niti Aayog is also an executive order through a set up which is 2015. So Planning Commission ता आगरु कोन करथला. We'll see in brief, very brief, Planning Commission कोन करथला. Question will usually not be asked on Planning Commission. Question may be asked on Niti Aayog. Because Planning Commission is no longer there. But आगरु Planning Commission कोन करथला. Planning Commission, first of all, it prepared 5-year plan documents. Okay, 5-year planning भी पूरा entire documentation ସେମାନେ କରିଥିଲେ. Then government ର ସେମାନେ advisory body ଥିଲେ. They were the advisor to the economic advisor to the government on how to achieve those targets. Then remember this part also is there. State plan भी ସେମାନେ formulate करଥିଲେ. Means state government ମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ ବି ସେମାନେ planning करଥିଲେ. So planning for state governments. Although state governments they themselves can also plan, but Planning Commission was also planning for state governments, right? And they also had financial powers, very important. Financial powers to allocate funds to the states and union ministries. Now, the main difference between Planning Commission and Niti Aayog is that Niti Aayog now does not have no such powers to Niti Aayog. Okay. But Planning Commission had this power. एबे कोन एबे सब allocation होची finance ministry through. आगरो Planning Commission itself प्रेरोगेटिव थिला और डिस्क्रिप्शन थिला कि को स्टेट को और को मिनिस्ट्री को केते माने एलोकेट करिवे. ओके. We are not talking about budget, but Planning Commission itself had some budget of its own. So that was a main difference with Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog आसे द्वारा financial powers काढी दिया है. Only it is only a think tank. Now Planning Commission no कोन criticisms अछि. Now this can also be asked. Planning Commission विषय रे भी जति न पचरा जो प्लानिंग रो कोन लाकुना थिला जहा पे नीति आयोग आसेला. So you should know एटा होची conceptual part कि कोन criticisms थिला planning of Planning Commission. First and foremost we'll say कि planning was a top down exercise. Okay. Top down exercise माने top down planning माने होची कि it is not taking into account people's needs. माने होची सेठी ऊपर बसिकी प्लानिंग कमिशन दिल्ली रे बसिकी सेठी किछि ब्यूरोक्राट्स माने प्लान कर दउछन कि हमें ए स्टेट मानकु एति पैसा दबु ओके और ए स्टेट रो हमें ए प्लान इंप्लीमेंट करिबु 5 वर्ष पई इंडिया रे ए प्लान इंप्लीमेंट करिबु so this is the main criticism it is a very top down exercise similarly bureaucratic and rigid approach to development bureaucratic माने once fix हो गला माने आ कुछ चेंज होगा एक बार कमिटमेंट कर दिया बस फिर मैं खुद का भी नहीं सुनता से टाइप का so which is bad actually planning एमिति हवा उचित which should be a flexible plan कि as per needs of your time as per the demands of the people your plan should also be able to change but 5 year plans were rigid very rigid therefore it was one of the major criticisms of 5 year planning was that it was not flexible similarly socialist leaning of planning ସବୁ ଜିନିଷରେ ସେମାନେ welfare ଉପରେ ବହୁତ ବେଶୀ focus କରୁଥିଲେ this was also a criticism and you know that this new government जो एनडीए गवर्नमेंट आसला तारो socialist leaning नहीं okay economically they are right wing that means कि ସେମାନେ economically ସେମାନେ होचंती capitalist okay? or neoliberal economics liberal or neoliberal in economic sense okay similarly there was also a lack of federal cooperation in the formulation of objectives in funds allocation and implementation of the schemes means planning commission under कौन होतला सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को पचारू ही नथे सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट प्लानिंग कमिशन संगे बसी से फॉर्मुलेट कर देले प्लान स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को धरे देले कहले नाउ दिस इज योर प्लान यू इंप्लीमेंट इट सो नीति आयोग रो मेन गोटे मेजर ऑब्जेक्टिव और मेजर काम होची कोऑपरेटिव फेडरलिज्म व्हिच वाज अर्लियर लैकिंग इन प्लानिंग कमिशन so the lack of inclusive government sorry inclusive development some generic points you can write okay. These were the major criticisms of planning and planning commission I don't know what happened to my throat hang on. Okay now come to niti aayog part तो यही सब लाकुना पाई 2015 रे गवर्नमेंट कोन कला नुवा गवर्नमेंट एनडीए गवर्नमेंट it replaced the planning commission with a new body which is national institution for transforming india or niti aayog niti national institution for transforming india now this is india's premier and state policy think tank means government think tank eta देखो हाउ सारा बहुत सारा प्राइवेट थिंक टैंक भी अछि फॉर एग्जांपल ऑब्जर्वर रिसर्च फाउंडेशन दिस इज ए प्राइवेट थिंक टैंक माने होची जे कि थिंक टैंक रो काम कोन कि से माने बहुत भाबी कि सब पॉलिसी डॉक्यूमेंट बाहर करिवे ओके डॉक्यूमेंट्स बाहर करिवे रिसर्च पेपर बाहर करिवे ओके गवर्नमेंट को एडवाइस करिवे एगुडा होची काम होची थिंक टैंक मानकर तो प्राइवेट थिंक टैंक जे बहुत सारा अछि सिमता सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट रो मेन गवर्नमेंट थिंक टैंक हला नीति आयोग ओके every year you will see that niti aayog is publishing a lot of reports indices है ना index बहुत सारा बाहर करे for example we had discussed कि SDG India index से बाहर करे आओ कौन बाहर करे can you tell नीति आयोग आओ कौन बाहर करे
Multidimensional poverty index.
very good national multi dimensional poverty index है ना तो आउरी बहुत सारा एमदे इंडेक्स रिपोर्ट्स माने बाहर करन this is the work of a think tank now niti aayog ro composition कोन गोटे chief executive officer CEO who is right now the CEO of niti aayog you know Amitabh Kant na? So he is appointed by the prime minister right and 7 to 8 full time members किछि अछंती किछि part time members रहिबे part time members माने usually they will be experts तांकर किछि expertise थिबो from sectors like economy planning administration finance ए सब जिंस रे okay security ए सब जिंस रे तांकर expertise थिबो they are advised sorry they are drafted into this think tank right this is the composition बहुत शॉर्ट रे एटा ब्रीफली नीति आयोग विषय दिया है मेजर पार्ट हला जहां क्वेश्चन आसी जाउची व्हाट आर द मैंडेट्स और व्हाट आर द ड्यूटीज और रिस्पांसिबिलिटीज ऑफ नीति आयोग दिस विल बी आस्क्ड इन द एग्जामिनेशन तो नीति आयोग रो कोन रिस्पांसिबिलिटी अछि द फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट गोटा लॉन्ग टर्म विजन से माने डेवलप करिवे फॉर डेवलपमेंट एंड प्रोवाइड स्ट्रेटजी टू अचीव इट ओके फॉर एग्जांपल यू वुड नो कि केमती लॉन्ग टर्म विजन केमती India Vision 2030 or something. ମୋର exactly ମନେ ପଡୁନି, ଏଟା ବି ଗୋଟେ ନୀତି ଆୟୋଗର vision ଅଛି।
2047
2047 okay ହେଇଥିବ, I don't remember the year। ସେମିତିଆ ନୀତି ଆୟୋଗର ଆଉ କଣ କଣ vision ଅଛି, ଯେମିତି I think air pollution ଉପରେ ବି ସେମାନେ ଗୋଟେ ବାହାର କରିଥିଲେ ଗୋଟେ long term plan vision, you remember that? ଗୋଟେ ସେକେଣ୍ଡ, ନୀତି ଆୟୋଗର ଗୋଟେ ଏୟାର ପଲ୍ୟୁସନ ଉପରେ ଥିଲା ନା vision, ଗୋଟେ action plan ଥିଲା I think, action plan for pollution ଗୋଟେ ଥିଲା। Okay। ସେଭଳିଆ ସେମାନେ ବହୁତ long term vision ସେମାନେ or strategy ସେମାନେ ବାହାର କରନ୍ତି। Right? This is the main mandate or main responsibility of niti ayog। ସେମିତିଆ this is very very important, they also foster cooperative federalism। cooperative federalism ମାନେ ହଉଛି center and state, they should not be confrontational but there should be cooperation between center and state। Right? cooperative federalism। So for example, what can be a good example of cooperative federalism? The GST Council forum itself is a good example of cooperative federalism। Why? Because taxation related decision jaha niya hochi, so GST Council knows major decision। for example, tax slabs or tax rates kete habo, ko goods ko kaha under re rakha jibo, right? GST Council knows। now if you see the composition of the GST Council, union finance minister etire achandi, ता छड़ा भी सबू chief ministers माने अछंती, then state finance minister और revenue minister भी अछंती, तो एमाने मिसी की unitedly they are taking decision। so is this not an example of cooperative federalism where center and state together are taking decision? so where decision is taken by center and state together rather than only by the center and imposed on the state, that is known as cooperative federalism। आगରୁ कौन होतला, center आगରୁ decision नहीं होतला, then ସେମାନେ କହୁଥିଲେ state ମାନଙ୍କୁ ତୁମେ ଏଟା implement କର। ଏବେ କଣ ହଉଛି, center और state ମିଶିକି decision ନଉଛନ୍ତି कि ଆମେ ଏଇ ଜିନିଷ implement କରିବୁ। this is the meaning of cooperative federalism and one of the major mandates of niti ayog itself ତିଆରି ହେବା ଆଗରୁ କୁହା ହେଇଥିଲା କି center state ର cooperation କେମିତି develop କରିବେ। okay। ସେମିତିଆ bottom up approach to development ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ଦେଖିଥିଲୁ କି one of the criticisms of planning is that it is a top down approach। so तार opposite niti ayog କଣ କହୁଛି, bottom up approach to development କରୁଛି। for example, village level ରେ ବି ସେମାନେ developmental plan ଦଉଛନ୍ତି। many of the developmental plan can also be implemented under GPDP, ग्राम पंचायत development plan। okay। so that means कि ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆମେ convince କରି consensus through ରେ development କରିବା rather than କିଛି ଗୋଟେ bureaucrat ମାନେ plan କରିକି ଜବରଦସ୍ତି କହିବେ କି ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ଏଇଟା implement କରାଯାଉ। right? Similarly, it also aims to incorporate or add national security concerns into economic policy। national security concerns into economic policy माने for example, let's say defense expenditure, ଏବେ defense ରେ କେତେ expenditure କରିବାର ଅଛି, even niti ayog can suggest। why? because it is something which is impacting national security। similarly, surveillance is also ଆମେ surveillance ଉପରେ କେତେ expenditure କରିବା ଉଚିତ। okay। even niti ayog can recommend on that also because it is something which is taking into account national security for economic policy। right? inclusive development, ଏଥିରେ ତମେ basic ଗୋଟେ ଜିନିଷ ଲେଖିପାରିବ, सबका साथ सबका विकास। because of this attitude of the government or this motto of the government, ମାନେ this motto is reflected or reflective of inclusive development। right? कि ସବୁ section of people, all section of people should be taken together and specifically vulnerable section ମାନଙ୍କର development ପାଇଁ specifically they will provide advice। right? ସେମିତିଆ monitor implementation of government initiatives। not only will it provide advice to the government, it will also monitor whether its advice or its initiatives are being implemented by the government properly or not। okay। support entrepreneurs and innovators, some generic points। then intersectoral and interdepartmental or interagency coordination for development। okay। good governance ଉପରେ ସେମାନେ best practices or data repository ସେମାନେ maintain କରିବେ, niti ayog maintain କରିବ ବୋଲି ଗୋଟେ provision ଅଛି। that means କି it is a repository or it will keep a record of best practices in good governance। technology upgradation ହବ country ରେ, capacity building ହବ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର, for example skill development ହବ। and apart from that it will also collaborate with other think tanks and other institutions at national level, at international level for sharing of ideas and good practices. These are all the mandates of Niti Aayog. Okay. So if you have any doubts now, please ask. Kichi doubt ଅଛି ଯଦି ପଚାର, because otherwise this chapter is over. କିଛି doubt ଅଛି? Ending of planning and planning commission and the coming of Niti Aayog. देखो प्लानिंग ऊपर क्वेश्चन आसीबो त बहुत स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड क्वेश्चन आसीबो, गोटे बेसिक क्वेश्चन आसीबो ओवरऑल प्लानिंग विषय तुमको पचरा हबो कि इवैल्यूएट whether planning was successful or not. सेतरे कोन हो फेज 1 फेज 2 फेज 3 रो मु ओवरऑल असेसमेंट देछि सेही सब का सेही पॉइंट उडा काम रे आसो रादर देन इंडिविजुअल 5 ईयर प्लान नो पॉइंट, राइट. और क्वेश्चन आसीबो कि प्लानिंग रो कोन लाखुना थिला कहीं की, और आसीबो कि व्हाट वाज द नेसेसिटी फॉर यू नो for starting Niti Aayog. ये वाला क्वेश्चन आसीबो. अदरवाइज दे विल नॉट आस्क यू इंडिविजुअल क्वेश्चंस कि 5 ईयर प्लान 6 विषय डिटेल लेखा बोल आ एथरो किछि प्रीलिम्स क्वेश्चन तमरो सॉल्व हो जो माने प्लानिंग रो एटा बहुत ही भलो नोट, प्री पई भी बहुत भलो नोट एटा. प्री पई जो 5 ईयर प्लान इंडिविजुअल प्लान रो हम समरी दैछि ना, सेटा प्री पई बहुत काम रे आसे. So they can ask you questions like indicative planning को 5 ईयर प्लान अंडर रे आसला. They can ask you questions like LPG reforms को 5 ईयर प्लान में आसला, और 12 5 ईयर प्लान नो ऑब्जेक्टिव कोन थिला, एही वाला क्वेश्चन आस परी, राइट. ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन को 5 ईयर प्लान अंडर रे आसला. So any doubt so far? पूरा एंटायर 5 ईयर प्लान और प्लानिंग चैप्टर रे कोन डाउट अछि प्लीज आस्क.
सर
ओके. हां प्लीज आस्क.
सर डाउट नुह गोटे क्वारी अछि माने जदि सेई टाइम रे सोशलिस्ट गवर्नमेंट न आसे कि कैपिटलिस्ट गवर्नमेंट आसले माने कोन हेतांता आज रो इंडिया सिनेरियो कोन चेंज हेतांता
को टाइम 1947 रे और 19 को टाइम
सर आर
1947 रे
जवाहरलाल नेहरू आसले जेते बेले फर्स्ट रो
1947 रे देखो इफ्स माने समितिया तो हमें बहुत इमेजिनेशन करी परिया नहीं. एंड यार आंसर जदि लोक माने किसी स्पेसिफिक आंसर देबे तो एतरू यू कैन जज पीपल्स बायस, बहुत बायस जज है यो. माने सपोज जने एंटी कांग्रेस टाइप रो गोटे लोक थियो, तार आंसर रु ही जाना पड़ जो कि से कहे कि कैपिटलिस्ट जदि गवर्नमेंट आस्तांता बहुत डेवलप हेतांता इंडिया, नेहरू तो किछ डेवलप कले से नो कि होगे तार किछ बायस अछि. आ जने कहे कि ना नेहरू जहा करछन बहुत भलो काम करछन आ सेही टाइम रे सेते ही पॉसिबल थिला. आमे ई बडा बायस बडा एरिया को जिपा. बट ओवरऑल व्हाट आई विल टेल यू कि व्हाट माय फीलिंग इज कि you should see always try to understand this thing कि hindsight is 2020. okay. सब बेले आमे त पछकू बोली कि देखियो हमको लागे कि हां एटा करिया छला एटा करिया छला एटा करिया छला, किंतु करंट सिनेरियो रे वी कैन नॉट ऑलवेज टेक द बेस्ट डिसीजन. द रीजन इज कि सब बेले प्रेजेंट और नाउ रे हम पाखरे इनकम्प्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन अछि, राइट. फॉर एग्जांपल एबे तुमको केते घंटा पढियार अछि, सपोज तुम कम पढुछो कि बेसी पढुछो तुमे जानि न एग्जैक्टली एग्जाम केबठरो स्टार्ट हबो बोली. ओके ऑल द नोटिफिकेशन आसी किछि प्लान मन डाउट अछि कि सेही टाइम रे हबो कि नै. सपोज एग्जाम पोस्टपोन हो गला, लुकिंग बैक तुमको हाइंडसाइट रे लागियो कि अरे मु एते बेसी सेही टाइम रे न पढी कि लास्ट टाइम रे बेसी पढिले बेटर हितान. और जदि ऑपोजिट हो गला कि एग्जाम एक्चुअली 25 रो स्टार्ट हो गला आ तुमे एबे भलो से पढुना, तुमे परे भाबियो कि यार एग्जाम तो नोटिफिकेशन आसी हितला मु काहे कि से टाइम रे पढी, मु जदि पढी थांती भलो से ताले भलो हिता. सो हमें करेंटली सबले इनकम्प्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन बेसिस रे ऑपरेट करू. ओनली व्हेन आम पाखरे कंप्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन केते आसी तले एई मोमेंट पारी हिजो आमे पास्ट को फेरी अने मे बी हेई पारे कि नेहरू को पाखरे सेति की कंप्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन नथिला सेई गवर्नमेंट पाखरे. इफ दे हैड दैट काइंड ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन और आइडिया जदि कैपिटलिस्ट काइंड ऑफ पॉलिसी नेले बेटर होंता. इवन दो कैपिटलिस्ट कंट्री गोटे हमको 300 वर्ष धरि सब्जुकेट करथला, मे बी कंट्री वुड हैव बीन मोर डेवलप. बट अगेन दे वर ऑपरेटिंग अंडर इनकम्प्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन. राइट नाउ हमको कौन इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी फॉलो करियार अछि एग्जैक्टली कोन समस्त जणा अछि. आ 5 वर्ष 6 वर्ष परे व्हेन वी लुक बैक देन वी विल गेट टू नो कि नहीं हमको तो 2024 रे ही डिसीजन नबार. सो हु नोस what should have been done. So whether you agree or not, what do you think? तुमको कौन लागुଛି कैपिटलिस्ट करियर थिला कि
ना तो सेई टाइम रे सी नीडेड थिला बढिया लागुଛି.
We don't know
ଆଉ
na.
ତ ଯୋଉ ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ ସାର୍ ଯୋଉ ଆପଣ କହିଲେ ଯେ ଟାଇମ ଅନୁସାରେ ଆମେ ଏବେ ଇନକମ୍ପ୍ଲିଟ ଫିଲ୍ କରୁଛୁ ଯୋଉ ବି ଜିନିଷ କରୁଛୁ ସେଇଟା ଠିକ ଲାଗିଲା ନା ଏଇ ଜିନିଷଟା ଠିକ ହେଇପାରିବ ବୋଲି ମାନେ ଯୋଉଠି କହିଲେ ବି ଏଇଟା ବେଟର ହେବ ଯେ ଆମେ ଟାଇମ ଅନୁସାରେ ଆମେ ଯେମିତି ଆଗରୁ ଆମେ 10th କ୍ଲାସରେ ଆମେ ଏକ୍ଜାମ ଦେଲା ପରେ ଆମକୁ କଷ୍ଟ ଲାଗୁଥିଲା ପାର ଗଲା ପରେ ଆମକୁ ଲାଗୁଛି ନା ବହୁତ ଇଜି ଏକ୍ଜାମ କିଛି ନଥିଲା ଏମିତି ଯୋଉ ଫିଲିଂ ଆସୁଛି
Correct, correct. No, I completely agree. That is the point, no? But anyway, let me. I think I should stop the recording now, and you can ask some of your personal question as well, because today is the economy last class. Okay.